In this mysterious world there were both heroes and demon kings. Heroes in this mysterious world were people who fought for the interests of the empire. But as for the demon king, he was a man. He was the ruler of the demonic kingdom. The hero receives his powers from the world and uses them with one goal in mind: to kill the demon king so that he can no longer cause discord. On the other hand, the demon king existed only to kill the hero. The warriors who helped the hero were already approaching the king, but the pagans who were on his side began to stop them. By the way, the people who were on the side of the demon king are called unit commanders. There are 12 official divisions in total, numbered 1 through 12, and they are the demon king's brutal wards. Some say that no one can stand against them, but even such strong demons have a very difficult time dealing with a hero. However, there is someone who has already managed to kill one of the heroes. This demon was the commander of Unit 0. His name was Demon Arut. His essence as the Demon King's Joker is already very well known to everyone. He is also the talent that is valued by the king more than all other demons. Harut came to the king with a note saying that he wanted to be freed. However, such actions greatly angered the ruler. He asked how he could dare to do such a thing. He began to beg Aruth to stay, saying that he would never let him go. The king began to wonder why the commander had left so suddenly. He also asked if there was something he didn't like about the Demon King's castle, or if the subordinates weren't giving him the respect he deserved and were discrediting Aruth because he was human. A commander is someone whose strength cannot be disputed, even though he is human. He possesses a strength that cannot be gained even with training. Harut is an object of veneration, as well as the most powerful card in the hands of the Demon King. But the king did not understand who had enough strength to hinder him. Harut replied that his subordinates were not guilty of anything. The king again asked what the reason was then. He began to say that if he did not say. But the commander interrupted him, and without emotion asked what the king would do to him. Would he really kill him? These words greatly surprised the king. He began to make excuses and say that he would never do such a thing. He just wanted to know the reason for his release. The king again began to ask the reason. He asked if it was because he had not sent him to the border, and he was leaving because he wanted to fight. But that was not the case at all. Harut shouted that the king had calmed down, after which his nose bled. He apologized for soiling the floor. The king began shouting throughout the castle to bring the doctor of the commander of Unit 0 into the room. What was he doing when his commander was in such a state? Ben, the 0-unit doctor, came into the room. He started saying that these were the effects of the last battle. However, the king interrupted him, saying that he had summoned him not to hear the known information, but to cure Aruth immediately. After these words, he asked if Ben knew what would happen to him if he did not carry out the order. Ben replied that he knew and would do everything possible. Returning to Aruth, he said that they should continue their conversation, adding that he should return and focus on his recovery, and gave the order for Aruth to be taken to a room. Ben grabbed the commander's hand and pulled him into the room. He tried to stop him, saying he could go himself, but Ben didn't hear him. In reality, Harut just wanted to leave and start a new happy life, but they all keep saying whatever comes to mind. Lying in his room, he wondered who he was. The demon Aruth? No. In fact, he was Dion Hart, and in the demon fortress he was the weakest person. A maid approached the boy and told him that as soon as he drank the medicine, she would take his drink. When Harut was handing over the glass, he accidentally pushed the girl. She began to apologize. Harut insisted that she leave, and as she left the room she was happy because their hands had touched. The boy thought she hated him. He was hurt by the fact that she didn't want their hands to touch. The boy began to wonder how they cared for him. He remembered how he had once met the king in the corridor, who had begun to ask why Harut was wandering around the corridors when he had not yet fully recovered. In the dining room, the king gave him a huge piece of meat, saying that the boy would not be able to recover if he ate so little. Harut was the only person in the kingdom, born with the weakest body, suffering from the slightest stress. He is mistakenly considered strong, and that is why he was made the commander of Unit 0. That is why he became a direct subordinate of the Demon King. At first he may lie that these are the consequences of a battle with a hero, but if anyone finds out that he was born with a weak body, he will die. The guy can't stay here anymore. He has to leave this place as quickly as possible because he's going to live a long and happy life. One of the advisors, Ed, ran into the room. He returned from the human world holding a new cube in his hands. It was called the Mirror Cube. Ed was one of the demons, surrounded by whom Harut can feel calm. Ed visits the world of people and brings from there various little things with which Harut entertains himself. After giving the cube to Aruth, he began to wonder what they could do to save the commander from the consequences of that battle. Aruth replied that he would manage on his own. Ed emphasized that this was not true at all. He would find a way to cure him even if it meant beating Ben. Aruth was frightened by these words. Demons were quite scary to him. Bowing, Ed urged the commander to rest well and regain his strength. Harut replied that he would do just that. None of the demons cared about the commander as much as Ed did, and Harut could only thank him for that. At night, the Demon King was in his office, reviewing the statement of Aruth's release. The king remembered that Aruth's actions had been impossible to predict from their first meeting. The king remembered how they had first met. The boy had shown such great courage when he started fighting for the Empire. The king couldn't believe they had sent someone useful. If the king were in the capital of the Empire, he would not send such a man to die an ignominious death. If you think about it, Harut was too free after joining them. The king gave the order to gather all the commanders of the units. Harut should be pleased with this. The commander was very sad, because he had lost his chance to get the desired rest because of the gathering. He did not understand why the king had ordered rest, and now he was organizing a gathering. He couldn't believe that he was about to meet all the commanders, because he was scared to death by ordinary demons. The king must have wanted Aruth dead. The guy understood that it was better not to start conflicts, because if there was a fight, he wouldn't be able to win it. The guy was walking past two ordinary demons. They asked if he was the same Harut. The guy said in a very angry voice that his name was Dion Hart. They were very scared, because they thought the guy was in a very bad mood. But the guy understood that it was good that they were afraid of him, because in a fight he would not be able to win. Harut didn't understand where the feeling came from, that over time the misunderstanding was only increasing, but thanks to this, no one approached him. If he is caught here, he will die immediately, so he cannot let anyone know that he is weak. Harut must carry himself very confidently. As he approached, he realized that he had to act as if he wasn't afraid of anyone. Approaching the security guard with a serious face, he asked for the door to be opened for him. Entering the office, he saw several commanders and the king, who said that the last, but not least, commander of Unit 0 had joined them. The boy was immediately frightened by the whole atmosphere in the room. The commander of the first unit, Jakar, turned to him and told him to sit next to the king. The commander of the third unit, Azild, thought that if you didn't look at the guy, he seemed very weak. He couldn't believe that this was not so and wanted to fight him. Also, there were the commander of the fourth unit, Devilia, and the commander of the sixth, Veliton. The man asked what excuses the guy had for being late, and the girl replied that he had his reasons. And the commander of the 11th Division, Reinel, could not understand how Veliton had the right to show such disrespect to Lord Aruth. At this time, the guy could not understand why such a large number of commanders had gathered here. He was very scared here and wanted to return to his room. The king asked if Aruth was well. He replied that he was and apologized for being late. The king replied that he had not done it on purpose. A young man approached Harut and poured him a glass of wine. During meetings in the kingdom, you can drink as much alcohol as you want, which is why Harut came to the meeting. The guy took a sip from the glass and realized that it wasn't alcohol at all. It looked like grape juice. Although others had drinks that looked like alcohol, the boy thought it was a discredit against him. But the king said that it was he who ordered him to be poured juice instead of wine, all because of the boy's love for wine. The boy thought that the king was sparing him drink because he was so useless to them, and in that case this meeting would be the death of a Ruth. However, the king interrupted the boy's worries. He asked to listen to him before getting angry. There is a reason why he gathered everyone here. After that, the king turned to Velaton and asked him to share the details of the document he had given him. He replied that despite the fact that the 12th unit had been defending the settlement all this time, the number of monsters had increased, and they could not contain them on their own. After the demonic creatures destroyed half of the large settlement, they evacuated those who remained behind the wall of the great city. But they don't know how long the city will last, so they need help to defeat all those monsters. Among the Demon King's creations, monsters were indifferent creatures, driven only by their instincts and desires. They were unfortunate creatures. Harut could not believe the fact that the commander of the 12th unit could lose, but he also did not understand how he was connected to all of this. Velaton added that they are at war every day because the number of monsters has increased, but they have no idea why this could have happened. The king said that the hero who died was killing them, so it was no surprise that he died just when the monsters gathered in one settlement. And he added that the hero was killed by Lord Harut. Then the boy realized that they intended to kill him for this reason, but he didn't actually kill the hero. But wasn't the Demon King himself trying to kill him? If anyone was to be blamed, it was him. Harut looked at him very frightened and begged him to say something. With a sly smile, he said that Unit 0 would go to the settlement to help. The guy was simply stunned by this information, and the king, thinking that he had done everything correctly, told Harut to relieve himself of stress there. The giant looked at the boy in surprise, because the king had sent him there as if for a simple exploration of the territory. He thinks the king believes in the fact that the commander of Unit 0 will be able to do exactly what Unit 12 couldn't. He couldn't understand how strong the boy was, how he had earned so much trust from the Demon King. The boy frowned, thinking that the king would not let him go, and began to say that his body was not in the best shape at all right now. The commanders of the 1st and 3rd units were looking at him from the sidelines, and Azild immediately realized that the guy was talking as if he didn't want to go there. However, the commander of the 1st unit told him that he thought Harut simply didn't want to go there after hearing the report. However, most likely he is simply suppressing his strong desire to go there, calmly assessing his body's capabilities. Although Jakar still didn't trust him, the way the boy behaved was worthy of the behavior of a great commander. According to the commander of the 3rd unit, the guy was not only strong, but also very balanced in his decisions, which made him want to fight him even harder. The Demon King emphasized that Harut should not overexert himself, but simply take command of his squad there, and asked if it would be difficult. But for the guy it wasn't just difficult, it was almost impossible. He really wanted to say it, but in that situation he had no right to refuse. Without wasting time, he said he would leave, but Harut understood that it didn't matter to him whether the king would let him escape. He would do it anyway. Harut was already driving to the settlement. This day had finally come, because he had always tried to escape. Day X had only gotten closer. When the boy was packing his things to escape, the king came to him and asked if he really wanted to leave so much that he had already started packing his things. The guy couldn't answer that he was really going to escape to the Empire, although it wouldn't be easy for him there either. So he said that he was already waiting for death. There was a mad emperor in the Empire who sent the boy to the king, as well as his brother, who hated Aruth, but it was better than inevitable death from monsters. Harut had heard that Unit 0, like Ed, knew their stuff, so the guy could just step back, play his part, and they would take care of the rest. The guy wondered if he would need to do anything at all, because even the Demon King had told him not to overwork himself there, but simply to give orders. The boy was done with his worries, so he was able to spend some time alone. From his bag, he took out a bottle of special wine from the demonic realm. Because of the Demon King, the guy couldn't drink during the gathering, but they don't know him if they think he can seem so simple. They say that this wine is so good that you can go to heaven from the pleasure, which is why the guy couldn't help but try it before he died. Ed drove up to Aruth's carriage. He didn't know if the commander was still feeling unwell, but he thought it was all because of the incident before the departure. Before leaving, one of his subordinates approached Harut and said that he should travel in a carriage, not a horse, because he had not yet fully recovered. Harut couldn't understand what he was talking about. Of course he had to ride in a carriage. Who had ever told him that he wanted to ride that fierce beast? Having agreed, he got into the carriage. Ed was disappointed. He had been serving Arutha for a long time, so he could say with confidence that he wanted to ride a cream horse. Because he regularly restrains his desires, Ed wants to tell him to act as he wants, but the Demon King's order was given for the commander's own sake. The team arrived at the settlement. There were no survivors. All the buildings were burned. Ed ordered to catch up with the monsters, because they must be somewhere nearby. Immediately after these words, a large number of monsters appeared before them. Ed gave the order for the warriors to begin fighting for Sir Aruth, who depended on them. A fight began. The warriors, together with Ed, began to kill the monsters, but at one point Ed let down his guard. A very large creature appeared near him and attacked him. Meanwhile, in the palace, the king was talking to the leader of the first unit, who asked if only the 0 unit could handle that crowd. He also added that there were quite a few monsters in that city. He wondered if they should send reinforcements there. But the king began to reassure the commander. He said that everything would be fine with them, because the 0 unit was very strong. Besides, if they encounter a real threat, they have Harut with them. Harut appeared before Ed, skillfully pushing the monster away. He put a knife to his partner's forehead and asked if he was also his opponent. Ed, who had a sharp knife near his forehead, immediately realized that Harut only behaved like this when he was tipsy, but he couldn't figure out where the guy had gotten the bottle from. Without waiting for an answer, Harut looked at the monster and said that he was his opponent. Before he could understand anything, he was lying on the ground. Having recovered a little, Harut got up and began to mercilessly cut down that monster. It was enough for him to cut off the enemy from his ally to win. The warriors of the 0 squad were stunned by what was happening before their eyes. Now they understood what kind of commander Harut was. The commander acted on the principle of leaving nothing alive behind, even if the enemy seemed dead. It was impossible to stop. By doing so, the boy was supposed to instill terror in his enemies. This is how the boy was able to survive in this world, having such a weak body. The action was transferred to Emperor Eduardo Desert. He was informed that a soldier sent to scout had confirmed that Harut had participated in the battle. Rumor has it that he displayed incredible strength and cruelty. The commander of Unit 0 there was the king's most valuable talent. The emperor said that because of these words he missed some people, and also added that they should prepare for the fact that an army of demons could attack them. Eduardo told the guy who was giving him the information that he had the perfect candidate and that he was giving him a special opportunity to gain an achievement. After the boy replied that he would carry out any assignment, the emperor extended his hand to him and offered to become his very talent. An 8-year war, for the glory of the empire. This place was drenched in blood. The vanguard fell a noble sacrifice on the front lines. It was just hell. Harut did not want to fall into this hell, because he was simply sacrificing himself for the empire, which sent him to this merciless hell. He did everything to survive and refused to die according to their wishes. He understood that he had to survive, and no matter what the price was for it. Suddenly the boy woke up. It was all a dream. It seemed to be about something important. The boy woke up in his room. Ed and Ben were next to him. Ed was very excited, as Harut had been asleep all day. Ben reported that they managed to treat him while he was asleep, but they were shocked when he came back bleeding. Ed added that the destruction of the demonic monsters was successful. They all ran away. And after the commander fainted, they returned to the castle. Harut was very surprised. He shouted, asking if the mission was really completed and how he could have fainted. Ben said the injury was serious if he lost his memory. Aruth was hit by the monster, but it jumped up immediately, so they didn't think anything bad happened. While the boy was trying to understand how he could have lost his memory, he began to remember what exactly happened that day. He didn't understand what it all meant. After thinking a little, he began to think that he had gotten drunk and done something wrong, and that he had passed out because of the alcohol, not because of the wounds he had received. However, Ben pulled him out of his thoughts, saying that he had heard that Unit 0 had completed the mission without any expense, despite the number of monsters. The guy, thinking that he didn't do anything and that Ed and Unit 0 did everything, started apologizing to him for coming in and causing trouble. However, he said that Harut was simply unbeatable. He himself killed a large number of monsters on the front lines. Harut was a true commander. But Ben added that the commander had overestimated himself a bit. Although they knew about his strength, his body was now very weak due to the battle with the hero. Ben insisted that Harut be more careful in the future. The commander did not understand at all how he himself could defeat even one monster. Ed added that although the commander could not fully trust them, thanks to him they were all alive, so they would become stronger so that Harut could finally rest. Harut almost went crazy. His subordinates were putting too much pressure on him. He didn't understand what they were talking about. He didn't have such opportunities. Despite all these words, he didn't care at all. He just wanted to get out of there. At that moment, 2 unit commanders entered the room. The commander of the 4th unit, Devilia, turned to the boy and said that they came here because they heard that he had woken up. Looking at the girl, the commander of the 3rd unit, Azild, emphasized that she should be a little quieter, because Harut was still recovering his strength. They started arguing very loudly about this. Commander Harut couldn't quite understand why they had come at all. They weren't the same and close. Jakar also joined the room. He emphasized that if they came to visit the guy, they should say hello and leave quietly, because he was uncomfortable. Harut imagined in his head how he would scream and chase them all away, but in real life he could not afford to do so. The commander of the 1st unit, Jakar, emphasized that he understood how the boy felt, but he begged him to refrain from fighting within the walls of the king's castle. However, Harut did not understand at all how he could think that the boy could even kill someone. It would be a miracle if he could land even one blow. I think that if they all found out how weak he was now, they would show no mercy. Harut realized that he had to teach them. They will be able to spare him even after they learn how weak the boy is. At this time, Azild asked for his forgiveness. The guy, realizing that he had to choose the right words and that he shouldn't show emotions, said that he was very angry. But you shouldn't use violence just for that reason. Sometimes you need to show mercy too. He added that they should learn to show it. The 3 leaders replied that they would keep that in mind. Harut couldn't understand what the atmosphere was like. Did it all seem like a sermon? Jakar reported that he heard how Harut successfully completed the assigned mission and added that he thought the commander did a good job. Devilia, not holding back her emotions, began to address the boy. She said that they were talking a lot about him in the castle, namely that he had killed half of the monsters himself. What he heard almost made Harut laugh. He couldn't believe that such ridiculous rumors were circulating about him in the castle. How he could have done such a thing himself. Azild turned to the boy and said that he had heard about the boy's heroism, so he had come to ask for a small favor. He said he was asking for a simple little thing. Azild wanted to spar with him as soon as Harut fully recovered. This won't even be a battle with an ordinary demon, but a sparring match with a unit commander who leads elite troops to protect the Demon King. Harut asked if he had heard everything correctly. Azild replied that he had heard it correctly, for he had long heard of the power of the great Sir Harut, and so he wanted to learn from him. Jakar remembered that the commander of the 1st squad had never sparred with anyone, so he would also like to see such a battle. Devilia was also very happy to hear this. She said that she would gather as many spectators as possible, but Harut replied that he did not want any sparring. But all the unit commanders at that moment looked at the guy so much that he simply could not refuse Azilda's offer. The boy couldn't understand why they were deciding everything without asking him. Azild would tear him into a million pieces with just one blow. Harut began to make excuses, saying that it would be quite difficult to accept this sparring, because his body had not yet fully recovered from the battle with the hero. Azild looked at the boy with completely uncomprehending eyes. Seeing this, Harut realized that such frivolous excuses would not help in this situation. Jakar joined the conversation. He said that now he understood why the commander of the Zero unit did not participate in the sparring. He took care of his opponent. Azild and Aruth were surprised by these words, and Jakar added that giving up was the best choice. Too little time had passed since the last battle for this. After Jakar's words, Azild added that based on his words, once the sparring begins, it will only end after someone's death. Azild began to think that the boy was completely confident in his victory, even though the commander had the audacity to offer to fight on equal terms. However, he never had the confidence that he would be able to emerge victorious from this battle. Harut is a talent recognized by the Demon King. After a short silence, Azild said that he could not guarantee his victory, or say that he was ready to die. He would not have the courage to compete with him. He approached Harut, bowed to him, and said that although it hurt his pride, he thanked the commander for listening to him. To Ed, as expected, Sir Harut was incredible. He made the enemy commanders treat him with respect. At this time, Harut was surprised by the refusal. But Azild continued to speak and said that this was not all. When he gained enough strength and confidence, he would offer sparring again. He felt incredibly enthusiastic about the fact that he had made a promise to Sir Aruth. But Aruth was not at all happy with the commander's insistence. Saying that he was going to train, Azild left the room. The team was surprised that he did it so quickly. Harut tried to stop him. Jakar said that Azild hadn't been so motivated to do anything in a long time, but Harut was finally able to ignite a fire in his soul for improvement. Harut clutched his head. Ed immediately went to him, but realizing that the commander's temperature had risen again, he said that Harut needed rest. Jakar said he apologized and wished her a speedy recovery. Devilia also apologized and said they were leaving. As he left the room, Jakar asked if he could spar with the commander of the 3rd unit when Harut recovered. When everyone had dispersed, Harut quietly left the room and went outside. It was quite difficult, and he still couldn't understand how he managed to escape from there. Ed and Ben were constantly coming to see the boy. Ed always said that Harut should meet with the unit, and Ben that Harut should add exercise to his routine. The boy, remembering all this, became very angry and hit a pebble with all his strength. This pebble flew into the head of one of the soldiers. The boy was afraid that he would be killed now. However, the demon, seeing that it was Harut, approached him, bowed, and apologized for causing the commander's concern. Harut saw the girl. The demon said that they were teaching her reason, because she blocked the way, being a lower incubus, but they had already figured it out. Harut had heard that incubi were the lowest demons in the demon world's hierarchy, which meant they were simply a group of people who had gathered together to bully others. The girl recognized Harut. The demons left. The guy was glad that they left without any conflicts, but he didn't know what to do with the girl. It was the first time the guy had seen a demon weaker than him. The girl had heard that Harut usually behaved quietly, but when he got angry, he showed unprecedented cruelty. She thought she was annoying the guy. The girl began to cry, thinking that this time she might really die. However, Harut held out his hand to her and asked if she could get up. He reported that the pagans had left. The girl understood that Harut was not looking at her with disgust, but most likely with good intentions. The girl, who couldn't remember the last time she was treated like this, said she was an incubus and asked if Harut felt disgusted by contact with her. The guy, saying that he was a human and asking if she felt disgusted by this, grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him to lift her off the floor. The girl said of course not. Then Harut, realizing that she was also just trying to survive in the demonic kingdom, said that he was too. The girl asked how Harut could be so kind. Until that moment, no one had ever treated her with such warmth and kindness. The girl said she wanted to repay Arutha for this and asked if he had a moment. The boy had a feeling that he was in big trouble. At that moment, the Demon King entered Aruth's room, wanting to visit and see how the boy was doing. When he entered the room, he didn't find him there. The commander asked the girl if she needed exactly 1 minute. She replied that she just wanted to give him a tour of the garden and would give him some healing herbs. Because the guy is very busy, because he is the commander of the unit, the girl will understand if he refuses due to lack of time. The boy was surprised that there were gardens in such a depressing and ugly place. He asked the girl if he had heard everything correctly. The girl happily replied that she did. She also bowed and apologized for saying hello to him so late. She also added that her name was Hien. She was a gardener who took care of all the plants in the Demon King's castle. Hearing these words, the boy imagined an amazingly large garden. He understood that he needed just such a place for recovery now. The boy told Hyena that this all sounded like the perfect place to calm his nerves, and asked the girl to show him the garden, and she agreed. After walking a few hundred meters, they arrived at the garden. It was an extremely beautiful place. Harut told the girl that he really liked it here. Just as the boy began to think that this was the healing place, a large plant crawled out in front of his face, almost biting off the boy's head. The boy jumped back and was very scared. He didn't understand what had just happened. The hyena rushed to the plant and started saying that you shouldn't rush at Aruth. Making a very angry voice, she asked the plant if it wanted the girl to teach it a lesson again. After that, Hyena returned to the commander and apologized, adding that she thought the plant was just very happy that the guy had come. The boy started to remember how he thought he was glad to meet a demon weaker than him. The boy decided to take his words back. The girl is also crazy. The boy thought that this garden looked normal only at first glance. If there were only such plants inside, he should run away from there as soon as possible. The guy said that he had a very urgent matter to attend to, so he had to go. The hyena started saying that there were much cooler plants inside the garden. Harut replied that he had to meet his unit at the training area, as he had been away from them for a long time, so he had to meet them urgently. The guy said goodbye and left. Judging by his haste, the girl realized that the guy was really very busy. The girl thought that the next time they met, she should give him a gift, namely the safest plant from the garden, after which she and Aruth would become closer. Even when the boy was far enough away from the garden, he still had goosebumps on his skin. It was foolish to think that there was anything normal inside the demon castle. Harut realized that he would be best off in the room, because outside he would be faced with various dangers from all sides. Although the boy used this as an excuse, he really needed to meet with the warriors of his 0 unit. Harut imagined Ed saying that instead of lying in his room, he should meet with his subordinates and give them instructions, although Ed had never said anything remotely like that. The guy realized that since he was outside, he should at least show himself to them, especially since, after today's experience, he was no longer afraid to meet them. Harut came, but no one was there. Although he had completed his task and could have left, he was still curious to see how strong the 0 unit was. The guy saw a rack with wooden swords. While killing monsters, the guy was out of his mind. Now is a good time to check what he is capable of. Taking the sword, he eagerly lifted it up the mountain, but without holding it for even a few seconds, the sword pulled his hand to the floor. It was unexpectedly very heavy. The guy can barely lift a wooden sword. He couldn't understand how he could do anything with a metal one. He began to think that he had to get used to the dagger. He was pulled out of his thoughts by the sight of the unit members, and he began to hope that they hadn't seen anything. But the soldiers were simply happy to see him. They began to wonder how he was feeling, and said that they were starting to worry because they hadn't seen him for a long time. They all ran up to him and said that during the last mission he was simply unbeatable. Harut calmed them down and asked them to be quieter. They began to whisper that Harut still looked tired and that he always said he was fine. Harut was starting to get annoyed by this. Because the guy usually uses neglect tactics, he has to give them the necessary amount of encouragement, so he praised them for last time. Harut also added that he came here to say this, and he is also sure that they would have coped well without his intervention. The guy started to leave, but one of the team members hit him in the leg, and as he fell, he realized that he had to stay on his feet at all costs. Harut leaned on his sword. The man who had hit him in the leg began to wonder how he had managed not to fall. Realizing that he was in danger, Harut decided that he had to run away. However, instead of running away, the commander elbowed his attacker in the face with all his strength. Harut was stunned that he had been able to knock him down. Taking off his cloak, he saw a strange face. The attacker was an ordinary person. The commander couldn't believe it was a human. He began to wonder how an ordinary person could have entered the demon castle. From the faces of the unit, the boy realized that the warriors did not know him either. Harut realized that he could not let him escape. He struck him with all his strength with his sword. Leaving the hall, Harut gave the order for his warriors to report what had happened to the Demon King, and the man was locked up somewhere. The team was depressed because they thought Harut was disappointed in them for allowing an outsider onto the training ground. All of Harut's actions were smooth and quick. The commander, while strolling, dodged the attack with incredible speed and even attacked in return. In addition, Harut caught the outsider at the moment when he tried to escape and took control of the situation. The status of the commander of Unit 0 was so great that his presence alone would overshadow the entire unit. One of the warriors realized that he would have to train even harder to gain recognition, but Harut's level was beyond all expectations. They were not even worthy of his fingers. A few minutes of silence passed, and then the entire unit decided that they should not waste a minute and start training right away. They will train until they become worthy companions of Sir Arutha, and from today on they have decided that they will have no rest. Harut realized that he had overdone it a bit when he lifted the wooden sword, which caused his wrist to hurt a lot. However, it didn't matter because today he had done a good job with the annoying task. He could finally go to his room to rest. Arriving in the room, the boy went to bed. In the morning when he woke up, he saw the king in front of him, who said that Harut was very tired because he had slept soundly. The boy began to wonder what he was doing here. The king apologized for disturbing him so soon after waking up and asked if Harut would spare some time. The boy, thinking that he didn't want to, but the king had come and was waiting for him, maybe there was something urgent, asked what exactly he wanted from him. After some thought, Harut asked if this concerned an outsider. The king said that it did and invited Harut to go with him. As he descended, the boy realized that this was an underground prison. But he didn't understand why the Demon King was taking him here. Perhaps the thief had said something strange about him. Or maybe the Demon King really is going to use the boy to make an example. Entering the cell, Harut saw a very badly beaten boy. The commander was very scared. He couldn't even imagine what they had done to him that night. The Demon King approached the thief and asked Harut if the man looked familiar. The stranger began to shout that he would kill the Demon King. The king added that he had the power to defeat the demon despite being human. He had an ever-increasing power when the matter reached the king. Harut thought he was a hero. When a hero faces death during a battle with a king, he can take two paths: either self-destruct, causing great damage to the king, or pay with your life to spread the power in order to create a fragment of the hero. The emperor collects these fragments. The people who keep the fragments within themselves are also secretly called heroes, but officially this status must be earned. This is all just to abuse power on the part of the empire, but it's not even funny, sending the hero to the demonic kingdom. The Demon King reported that it would be more correct to call the man a hero candidate, or the remains of a hero. Harut realized that if he were officially recognized as a hero of the empire, he would not be so weak, but it would also be completely wrong to take him for granted. The emperor would not send hero candidates here for no reason. Harut was very curious about what the emperor was up to. Harut turned to the Demon King and asked if he could be left alone with this man. The Demon King, of course, allowed this to happen, and leaving the cell said he would wait for him outside. Harut said he would finish quickly. Harut understood that there was no message, and the stranger's target was the commander, but he did not understand at all what the reason was. The stranger addressed Harut by name and said that he had earned the Emperor's trust and become a hero of the Empire, and then simply fled from them to the side of the demons. Harut started laughing very loudly and said that he would never have thought that the Emperor would send a message to him in this way. Wiping his eyes from tears, he turned to the stranger again and asked what that ordinary, useless pawn was. Not understanding what was happening, the outsider began to shout that this was not true, and that he had received an important mission to kill a traitor to the Empire. Harut replied that this was not true, and the proof of all this is that an outsider calls Arutha a traitor. Harut began to ask the stranger what sins he had committed to be thrown out like this. The man began to ask in what sense he had been thrown out. The commander said that the Emperor knows everything, knows the reason why he is in the demon realm and his purpose. He knows absolutely everything. Harut again began to ask why the Emperor had sent a man here to a dangerous demonic realm to kill a traitor. It was at that moment that the man realized he had been betrayed. As he left the cell, Harut informed him that he had time before death to think about his sins. The commander realized that the man had only superficial loyalty, and he had only wasted his time on him. It was all in vain. Harut saw the king before him. He asked if he had finished yet, and asked if his curiosity had been satisfied. The Demon King also asked what they should do with that madman now. Maybe they could use him in some way. Looking at the king with crazy eyes, Harut said that he left the decision to him alone, but the commander thought it would be better to just kill him. The Demon King replied that he would deal with everything himself, and added that in exchange for this, the commander had to do something for him. The first unit needed help on the front lines. They informed the king that they were dealing with not a simple candidate, but a true hero. As Harut already knew, if a hero appears on the front lines, and not a fragment that the Emperor does not mind, then ordinary demons will not be able to cope with him. And besides, the king himself was curious about what the Emperor's intentions were if he had sent both a fragment and a real hero here at the same time, so Harut had to figure it out. Harut seemed to wake up. He didn't understand how he ended up next to the king, who was already telling the commander to prepare to go to battle. Standing in front of the horses, the boy remembered how he had followed him to prison, and then he was being sent somewhere. What he remembered was the task he had received. Looking at the carriage, he saw Ed there, who informed him that preparations for departure were already complete. Harut understood that since he was going there, he should at least look at the face of this new hero to reassure himself, but he was also simply curious. Ed knew that the commander had quenched his desire when he went off to kill monsters, but he was sure that it was not enough to fully satisfy Harut. Ed also heard that very terrible things were happening on the front lines, but looking at Sir Harut's face, you could see joy, as if he was going on a vacation. Suddenly, from above, Harut heard a familiar voice. Raising his head, he saw the commander of the 11th unit. She said that she missed the guy. Harut asked what she was doing here. Despite Reinel's sweet appearance, she exuded quite a strong demonic energy. She was second only to the king. The girl replied that she had heard that the commander was going to the front, so she had prepared a gift for him, a pendant. Harut didn't know what he was doing, but he looked quite strange. He didn't understand why the girl was giving him it. Harut thought it was not worth taking. However, Reinel said that she had placed a protective spell on him, so he would not let Arutha die even once. Hearing this, the commander took him. The girl herself gave it to the commander, so obviously he should accept this pendant. Why would he look for a reason to refuse? The guy started stroking her head. Her bow looked strange and unpleasant, but Reinel didn't look disappointed, so we could breathe a sigh of relief. Ed reported that he knew how strong Harut was, but still worried about him because of the last battle. He thanked Reinella. The girl was very pleasantly surprised by what a good Lieutenant Harut had, because Ed always worries so much about his commander's feelings. The boy began to think about the consequences of killing the hero. He was not going to restrain the hero who was about to explode. Also, Harut did not absorb the energy from his self-destruction, because at that moment he was just an ordinary companion of the hero. Harut and his unit were walking through the forest. After the fight, there were few people left. A boy came out in front of the commander and ordered him to stay there. He was a hero. Harut is stunned by the hero's words, but he is serious. He ends the battle alone, with a unit of the Empire. The Demon King is the strongest in history. The hero does not guarantee Harut's safety. Someone is needed to report to the Empire. The hero says he knows why the past hero came here. Arutha needs higher achievements. Smiling slyly, the hero says, returning with results will be the greatest achievement for Aruth. He asks, what did Harut wish for the Emperor if even past achievements were not enough, and he agreed to it? Without waiting for an answer, the hero turns around. I'm waiting for the report. When you come back, I'll find out, and leaves. Time passed. Harut did not know how long the battle lasted or who had won. His legs did not obey. He rises. If we win, he will return the unit. If we lose, he will report. Everything should be fine. Looking out of the bushes, he sees, the battle is over. The entire unit is dead. The hero is on his knees before the Demon King. The king approaches, asks for the hero's last words, and he begins to self-destruct. Harut knows he must report. When Harut was about to leave, he heard a scary voice behind him. It was a demon, a small insect hiding there. The demon attacks with his sword. Harut manages to dodge, not understanding why he was swinging it like that. The commander knows. There's no escape. He needs to slow down the monster. When the demon loses his guard, Harut roars, runs between his legs, jumps and plunges a dagger into his neck. But the wound is not deep. The skin is thick. His strength is not enough. The guy doesn't know what to do next. They stand on the edge of the abyss. The ground cannot hold. It collapses. They fall with the monster down to the king and the dead. Harut survived, falling on the ogre. He thinks he could have killed him if he had used all his weight. Demons scream. The commander of the 7th unit has died. They ask who this man is and where does such strength come from. Harut is shocked. He fell into the enemy camp and killed the demon commander in front of them. He looks closely. He sees the Demon King, looking as if he wants to kill him on the spot. The king asks, "Why have you come?" He knows that the hero will be destroyed. Harut answers about duty. The hero asks if Harut really thinks he can survive here, let alone fulfill his duty. Considering Aruth a worthy hero, the hero wishes only one thing, that the world allow him to survive. Before self-destructing, the hero asks that Harut receive at least a fragment of his power. The king sees a light different from the usual one and understands. The hero is trying to convey his power. Harut holds the hero in his arms, considers him a fool. Power cannot be transferred simply to desires. But even if you try, your body won't accept the force because it's weak. The demons are shocked. A human has killed a hero. Harut stops the self-destruction to finish him off himself. He feels terrible agony, as if one can be healed by receiving a blow from a hero. He looked at his hand, covered in blood when he felt sick. He thought the end was due to a fall, but now is not the time. Harut will not be able to handle all the demons. This is most likely the end. The Demon King approaches from behind. He wonders why he is laughing and asks his name. It is in the commander's best interest to obey, so he says, "I am Dion Hart." Harut thinks he is waiting for the moment when the king weakens his defenses to escape. The king asks if he will join the demons. And he says, "Commander, don't worry about the confrontation between people and demons. When you see what it's like, you'll forget about even dreaming of confrontation." Harut had been trying to survive his whole life, but he didn't expect to do it this way. It all started that day. Everyone in the king's castle shares the unreal power of Aruth. The carriage stops. Ed says, "We have arrived. This is the border between the world of humans and demons, a frontline battle." Harut gets out of the carriage and sees Jakar in bad shape. Things are going badly. Harut should have refused, but he thought he would die otherwise, so he agreed. But from the beginning he had no choice. Life is difficult. Jakar apologizes. It's calm here. The battle is unknown. You can prepare. Harut doesn't understand what kind of training it is, and asks if he should train his unit. But the commander of the first unit tells him, "Prepare to enter when the Empire's units appear." At this time in the human world, 2 warriors are playing in the Imperial barracks. One reports, according to intelligence, the commander of Unit 0 will participate. The demons are motivated. For the people, Harut is the king's joker. He is stronger than the commander of the first unit, the 1 out of 12. One warrior asks, what to do if Harut is there? There are no guarantees of victory. The commander of the people says, "We will send a killer." The other argues, the killer will not cope. The commander only knows rumors about Harut, not the fact of his existence, perhaps an illusion of the king. He is the hero of Cruel, he adds. Finding out the truth is a great achievement. The priority is maximum information. Harut is shocked. He has to take part himself. He is worried, but he does not claim to be in command. Ed pulls Harut out of his thoughts. He asks how he is because he can't bandage him. He's shaking. Harut tells Ed, "It's okay, you can continue," and adds that he wants to see the hero. Ed asks, "What does the commander say? The world of people is ahead of us. Dawn is coming soon. Be careful." Ed finds it strange that Harut follows him without complaint, calls it cute. Harut thinks there's something magical about him. He vomits blood, loses consciousness, reacts worse to the sun. He's ordinary. He doesn't understand why Ed is his guardian. Maybe he's an angel. Ed finished bandaging. He says, "Now Harut is ready to kill people." Bandages are made with magic. They reflect the sun, retain temperature, and you can fight calmly. Harut knows about it. The king has cast magic. The commander's eyes and mouth are glowing. Ed says that judging by the king's magic, he values Harut very much. But Harut thinks the king is overwhelmed. Magic disrupts human order. Demonic energy for magic is non-renewable. They say that the more energy a demon uses, the faster a new hero will appear. Harut thinks, if the king is investing so much, then he is confident of defeating the hero. Meanwhile, Ed is finished dressing. The commander thanks him. Harut finds it annoying but convenient. Ed says, as long as there is Unit 0 and Harut, there is no need to worry. From the moment of the invasion, training without rest. Harut says he'll go visit the body of the commander of the 9th unit. Ed asks if it's better to conserve energy. Harut says he's strong enough and leaves. Unfortunately, this is just an excuse for Ed. In fact, Harut wants more time to find the hiding place. Going outside, he sees soldiers from other units. They are surprised by the appearance of the 0 unit commander. One demon says, "Now we can stop worrying." The commander of the 1st unit is also here. He sees the high spirit of the soldiers and understands the king's victorious tactics. A spy from the human world is watching Harut, shocked by the existence of Commander 0. But the indifference and pressure from Harut, even in the cassock, confirm the rumors. He may not be as strong as people think. A spy has confirmed his existence. The spy throws a poison dart at Harut. He skillfully dodges it. The spy is stunned. In reality, Harut simply tripped over the rocks, wondering why the demons didn't clear the path. A warrior approaches him and asks what happened. Harut replies that it's just a warm-up. People might attack. After some thought, the commander decides it is better to return to the tent than to look for a hiding place on the street. The spy sitting on a branch doesn't understand. If the commander returns, it means he's safe. But he thinks that Harut will simply inform his people to kill him quickly. In the tent, Ed asks, "Are you back?" Harut thinks he got things done quickly. Harut replies that he did everything and asks if Ed has heard anything about a new hero in the human army. Ed says, the commander of the 2nd unit was investigating the hero. He is wearing a helmet, but it is clear that he is the pinnacle of sword mastery. The spy continues to watch Harut, wondering why he doesn't say anything about that hero. Harut sits down at the table and sees a bottle of wine. He gets annoyed. Ed drinks, but he doesn't give him anything. But Ed says, "I've made a bet for him. If he drinks a little to calm his nerves, it's no big deal." As Harut raises his glass, he hears a strange sound. Ed asks, "Is there something there?" Harut is also sure. He heard something. The boys didn't pay attention, but it was to the spy's advantage. He threw a pebble, and while they were distracted, he poured poison into a glass of wine. Harut was already bringing the wine to his mouth. The spy was delighted. However, the commander abruptly threw the glass away, saying that a rat had gotten into their midst. A few seconds later, Harut recovered, not understanding why the glass of alcohol had flown out of his hands. He just wanted to wave away the annoying fly that kept annoyingly flying near his eyes. The guy pulled the glass to his mouth again, but it flew out of his hands again. Harut began to apologize to Ed, saying it wasn't intentional. Looking at the floor, the boys saw that there was poison in the wine. Ed looked at the roof of the tent and immediately said there was an outsider here. At this time, the spy was running away, realizing that he had to report to Sir Cruel as soon as possible. The abilities of the commander of Unit 0 were unsurpassed. For the people, Harut was the #1 danger. In the camp, the commander of the 1st Unit, Jaikar, informed the warriors that someone had dared to come, and their goal was to kill Harut. The demons immediately became interested in how someone could get here, because no one except the commander had seen anyone here except the warriors. Jaikar said that the punishment for letting an outsider in would come later, and now they had to explore the area. Ed approached Harut, apologized, and added that due to his stupidity, he had not noticed the stranger on the territory. Harut replied that he didn't think anyone could get past Ed. This showed how experienced the killer was. Harut must step down as commander, because even the fools of the Empire want to kill him. He couldn't even drink wine because of the murderer. After some thought, Harut turned to Ed. Ed replied that he would take any punishment, but the commander asked if the bottle was sealed. At that moment, a demon walked past the commander with another bottle. Harut grabbed it and asked Ed if he was sure that the glass, not the bottle, was poisoned. Ed replied that it was 100% true. To Harut, this meant that it was safe to drink straight from the bottle, and all the bottles were saved. The spy reported to the hero that the rumors about Harut were completely true. If everything continued in the same spirit, the Empire would have no chance at all. Cruel knew that the killer was no ordinary, untrained warrior, but even he returned completely confused. Now that they knew everything, they would need that guy to defeat the demons, since they had a commander with them. One of the warriors asked if Cruel needed another hero for the Empire. The commander replied that he did, and in his absence they would retreat a little. The warrior then asked if it would seem like fleeing out of fear of the 0 Unit commander if they began to retreat. Cruel replied that they would leave, but if anyone followed them, they would have to make sure they were 100% killed. They don't need to take up arms for useless lands, where the Son of Humanity won't reach. They should convey this to the demons. They will retreat without showing weakness. They must show that they are not going to fight unless they enter the human world. Cruel also added that he had been ordered to take back the lands of the Empire captured by demons, rather than expand their territory into a demonic kingdom. They have already regained the lost lands, so they need more friction between the kingdoms, which is why they are leaving. This is exactly what the Emperor needed to be told. Cruel didn't want to jump in too far and ruin his hero debut. He had gone too far, so he wouldn't let his reputation be ruined. The hero added that he hoped that Harut would not cause chaos. To this, one of the warriors reported that the commander rarely intervened in battles. As everyone breathed a sigh of relief, a warrior burst into the tent. He announced that the demon armies were coming and that Harut was leading them. The commander of Unit 0, who had drunk more than one bottle of wine, mercilessly killed the human warriors one by one. Ed understood that Harut was completely drunk. The situation was perfect. Thanks to the unit commander, all the soldiers were cheerful. In the eyes of the people, Harut was a devil. He approached the warrior of the Empire and asked why he was lying here. If he wanted to survive, he had to try. And if he doesn't even try to do anything to survive, he'll die as quickly as he does right now because of his laziness. Only Harut swung when he was repelled by a beam of magic. Ed rushed to the commander's aid and saw a man in armor. Fortunately for the Empire, one of the heroes arrived on the battlefield. Looking at Ed and Aruth, the hero announced that he was going to kill the leader of Unit 0 with one blow. Ed saw the Reinel pendant in Aruth's hands, and then he realized if it weren't for this protection, Aruth would no longer be alive. The warrior of the Empire, whom Aruth had just tried to kill, looked at the hero and immediately recognized him. Cruel had arrived on the battlefield. He was tearfully happy that he would finally be saved. However, Harut, who was already walking towards him, cut him in half with one blow of his dagger. Harut moved closer and closer to the man. When they were only a few meters apart, the commander stopped and asked if he was the new hero. The helmeted warrior replied that that was what everyone called him, but he believed that he did not deserve this great title at all. Then Harut replied that he had heard a lot about him, but the voice seemed very familiar. The commander told him to take off his helmet. The hero asked with a laugh if Harut wanted to suggest taking off his helmet in front of the enemy. He would never do that. The commander's voice was also familiar to him. While Harut continued talking about the helmet, the hero wondered why he knew this voice, since he had never met Harut anywhere before. Because the hero refused to take off his helmet to show his face, the unit commander rushed at him, saying that he would gladly do it himself. Fortunately for the hero, he managed to dodge. He realized that Harut was very fast. For one moment, the warrior even lost sight of him. But this did not mean that he would not be able to follow the attacks of the commander of the 0 unit at all. When they were close again, Harut asked if he should confirm that the warrior did not feel worthy of the title of hero. Although Aruth's speed annoyed the hero, his attacks remained quite weak, so the hero could easily repel them. At that moment, the hero knocked the dagger out of the commander's hands. He believed that if he continued to press Aruth with force, he would be able to easily win. Cruel couldn't understand why Aruth's attacks were so weak. He also couldn't tell that the commander was hiding his true strength, but it gave him an advantage. However, Harut reported that the battle was not bad, but that was all for today. The hero was angry. He reported that the war was not over yet. Harut continued to stand his ground, again saying that it was all over because the hero had already killed the commander of the 9th unit. Also, even after the Imperial lands were returned, he seemed dissatisfied, even coming to the demon world. They were simply reclaiming theirs. Finally, Harut suggested not wasting energy and asked why they didn't agree to defend their territories together. Cruel thought that he was right. There was no need to deviate from the plan and fight. But if he continued, he could kill Aruth. Behind him, Cruel heard voices asking if the new hero wanted to start a war. The troops would not agree to take part in it. The hero reported that they were retreating. The demons were in good spirits. The Empire had lost many. It was wiser to return to the plan. Harut turned and, saying that he hoped they would never meet again, began to walk back to his warriors. The demons began to discuss that the Empire was finally retreating. They could not remember what they had been through, but it was all thanks to Sir Arthur. But Jakar thought it was a great loss to retreat now. It could be a good chance to advance while the Empire's troops were demoralized. But he was sure there was a reason why Harut had called off the battle he had been waiting for so long. There was no need to spoil his mood. Harut approached Jakar. The commander of the 1st unit praised him for his good work, but Harut, after talking about his poor body, fainted. Holding Aruth in his arms, Jakar knew his entire body was on fire. Aruth had shown similar fighting prowess in such a state. Now the commander understood why the boy had stopped in the middle of the battle. He was thinking about the future, so he suppressed the desire to fight so that the hero would not see his condition. Besides, Aruth's defeat would greatly affect the confidence of the demon army. At this time, the commander was already being held by Ben and Ed. To Jaikar, Aruth was extremely powerful as he appeared out of nowhere and defended their position. Ben and Ed began to carry Aruth away. Harut killed the previous commander of the 7th Division and stopped the hero from self-destruction, and was also recognized by the Demon King himself. Although Jakar understood that he still couldn't recognize him, he still felt out of place. Despite everything today, Harut showed everyone why he is the commander of the 0 unit of the Demon Kingdom. In the Demon Kingdom, Reinel became ill. One of her subordinates asked what happened, to which she replied with one word: broken. She rushed at her subordinate, saying that he had broken down. He couldn't understand what the girl was talking about, and asked if it was about the barrier. She replied that she wasn't talking about that. Demonic monsters can't break the barrier. The pendant she recently gave to Aruth broke. The girl was very worried about the commander of Unit 0. She began to think that he was now in great danger. Saying that she had to go, she set off towards Aruth. The subordinate tried to stop her, as the king had ordered the barrier to be guarded, but it was too late. Meanwhile, Harut arrived at the palace where he was met by the king. He emphasized that he had heard everything from Jakar, and Harut was surprised there. He was curious about how the hero was doing. Harut said he had something to report about the new hero. Judging by the commander's mood, he hadn't completely withdrawn from the battle yet. The king asked why they didn't talk about it inside, since the commander of the 2nd unit also brought news of a new hero. With a laugh, the king said that judging by Aruth's face, he really liked the commander of the 2nd unit, but he was currently busy sorting information. Therefore, he would not be able to leave his office for a while. Aruth had nothing to worry about. The king ordered him to change his clothes and come to him. Having changed his clothes, Harut came to the king. They sat down at the table. The king handed the boy some papers and told him to look at them first. As he picked up the papers, Harut suddenly came to his senses. He couldn't understand how he had ended up in the Demon King's office, having recently been on the battlefield. He saw Reinel crying at his hand, saying that she was very glad to see Aruth alive. After that, he remembered what had happened, and thought he had gotten drunk and passed out. But he had only had one drink, so his perception of alcohol had become weaker. Reinel said the pendant was broken, so she immediately went to the field. There she found out that the boy had already returned, but she was just glad that everything was okay. The boy immediately remembered the pendant. It was supposed to save him from death only once. It was broken, which meant that the commander almost died. Then Reinel added that Aruth was able to fight the new hero and also protect the territory of the Demon Kingdom. She was glad that they had Aruth. After waking up, the guy began to think that he had gotten very drunk again and had made a big mess. The boy realized that he was holding a piece of paper in his hands. Unfolding it, he realized the new hero of the people was Cruel Heart. It's a name that Harut will never forget. Cruel Heart is a man he couldn't help but love, the older brother of the commander of Unit 0. The boy wondered when Cruel became a hero. He pushed Reinel away and, saying that he had something urgent to do, started to leave. The girl's subordinate said that Harut was really scary and asked if Reinel was okay. She replied that Harut was angry but so hot. Sitting on his bed in his room, Harut thought that the emperor was a complete fool. He knew everything, but he still made Cruel a hero, and all this just when the boy needed to return. Seeing the parchment, he began to remember little by little. The king asked Aruth if it was time to return to the empire. The boy replied that it was, and wanted to learn more about the new hero. The king agreed, but added that they would begin to suspect something if Harut was absent from the empire for a long time. The king also added that Harut should let them know if he found anything of interest to them in the empire. He placed a seal on Harut, a tracking magic. This was the conversation that had once taken place between the king and Harut. But the boy could not understand why he should act as the king's spy. He was sure that he lost his memories when he was nervous. Harut realized that he had to stop being so nervous so as not to lose all his memories. Ed knocked on the door. Entering, he announced that he had heard from the king that Harut was going to the human world today. Harut said that was exactly what it was. It was time to go back. He was going to find out something personal and asked if Ed had anything he wanted to tell him. Ed started to talk about the king's words, but Harut didn't listen. Instead, he interrupted and offered to become the unit commander. This stunned him. Ed spoke to the king, asked if the position of commander of the 9th Division was available. The king replied that it was, and appointed Ed as his deputy, because everything was taken. But he is more than worthy of the position of commander given his skills. He offers the position first of all to Ed. The unit commander, while Ed was serving Sir Aruth, had already forgotten how much he had always wanted to get into this position. Ed asked what would happen to the position of deputy commander of Unit 0. The king said he would look for someone weaker than Ed. He also added that he would give him time to think. But if he refused, the position would go to someone else, or it would be good if someone weak became him. Harut asked if the Demon King had said anything to Ed, since he remained silent. The commander began to think that he had been scolded for drinking. However, Ed, without answering anything, said that he would inform the cook to prepare food for him for the journey to the human world. This did not please Aruth. One of their subordinates also came into the room and said that the carriage was ready. The commander replied that he would be leaving soon. As he left, Harut began to think that Ed had asked the king to demote him from his position as deputy commander because he was finding it difficult to serve his own. Harut stopped, turned to Ed, and asked if there was anything he wanted since he was going to the Empire. Maybe Ed needed something from there. Ed seems to have enjoyed the snacks from the Empire. Maybe he can bring something that keeps for a long time. Ed can ask the commander for anything he wants. Ed was very moved by these words. He didn't know if there was a leader in the whole world who cared so much about his subordinates. However, Ed refused. As he left the castle, he insisted that Harut always wear Ben's pendant and never take off his cloak while in the human world. There is no leader in the world who needs so much help. But the fact that Harut almost always needs Ed does not disappoint the deputy at all. After thinking, Ed replied to the king that he did not want to become the commander of the detachment at all. He likes being second in command under Sir Aruth, and besides, he wants to help him in absolutely everything. Therefore, wherever the commander of Unit 0 goes, Ed will always be waiting for him in the castle as his deputy. A few minutes later, Harut was in the human world. He approached the palace, at the entrance of which stood 2 guards. They reported that this was the home of Earl Hart, and since he was no longer there, outsiders were prohibited from entering the estate. However, Harut only asked them to open them. The guards did not understand what was happening. Did the boy really want to make Count Hart his enemy? The commander took off his cape and said he was trying to enter his house, but asked if the guards would try to stop him. Upon entering the house, all the servants were talking about the boy's return. Everyone gathered in the hallway and bowed to Aruth. However, the commander didn't like it at all. He had already told them all more than once that he didn't want to be greeted like that every time. His butler, Remember, also approached Aruth. He, saying that the commander had returned, also bowed to him. Remember had been here since Harut inherited the house. Harut said they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and the man asked if the commander was okay. Harut replied that he did. Everyone in the kingdom believes that he went on the Emperor's orders to kill monsters. The guy started to say that he had completed the task, but Remember interrupted him and said that he could not fight monsters due to his advanced age. To this, Harut replied that everything was fine, because he was no longer a child. Smiling, Remember said that it was so. He was now a count. Remember also asked if he should freshen up the general's room, to which he replied that he would not, as he was going to meet with the Emperor immediately. Of course, Harut would have liked to lie down and rest immediately upon arrival. However, he was sure that the Emperor had already been informed of his return to the Empire. And besides, he urgently had to ask the Emperor a few questions about Cruel. Harut ordered Remember to prepare everything for departure. At this time, Duke Illustrious Strabe was informed that Dion Hart had returned to the kingdom. The Duke believed that the boy had returned to his master. The hero Cruel entered the room. Looking at him slyly, Illuster said that his younger brother had returned to the Empire. After these words, Cruel said that he would make an inquiry to the Assassin's Guild. Illustrator Strabe asked what the hero would do if he was caught. Then the Duke, turning to Shayen, asked if they had a trump card up their sleeve. The girl asked if he was talking about the Revolutionary Army, and the Duke confirmed it. If this group of people who are trying to kill the Emperor intervene, it won't matter whether they are caught or not. Cruel apologized for not thinking of doing so sooner. He said he would contact the army. The Duke was curious to see how strong the Emperor's hero was. Meanwhile, at the Hart estate, the maids dressed a Ruth for his meeting with the Emperor. According to the girls, this outfit suited the commander very well, and for a Ruth it was complete chaos, taking a bath, changing clothes, but finally it was all over. One of the maids remarked that his clothes looked fine, but that a military uniform would not suit him anymore. Another replied that austerity was the fashion now. All the clothes were white. The boy didn't understand what they were even discussing. Remember reported that the sun was still high, so Harut should wear a mask. Harut turned to Remember and said that he knew it was quite late, but he was grateful to the man for taking care of the Hart name while he was away. The man replied that even if he died, he would not regret it. The young master had grown into a wonderful count, and it was an honor for Remember to receive recognition. But after these words, Remember added that he wanted to discuss his resignation after the commander returned. Harut could not believe what he was hearing. The boy started to dissuade him, but then Remember interrupted him and said that it was a joke, because his only joy was to see a Ruth's confused face. Within minutes, Harut was getting into a carriage near his estate. He announced that he did not need such a large number of guards. Not many in the Empire knew of a Ruth's return. The conversation shouldn't take long, so a few escorts would suffice. Sitting in the carriage, the commander realized that in the demon world he had to fawn over the demon king, and here he had to fawn over the emperor. But there was one thing that remained constant. The emperor was as fearless as the demon king. Eduardo seized the throne, eliminating all rivals. He killed all his brothers and sisters and crowned himself in a robe soaked in blood. Even 10 years later, this topic is still hotly debated. At the end of the coronation, which began with the bloodshed of his own family, a new king emerged. Edward had gained this position by shedding a lot of blood, so he wanted to abandon the old one and change the name of the country. From now on, this state would be an empire. Edward gave the country its name with this funny decree. Because of this, other countries could not stay away. This led to a war that lasted for 8 long years. Although some of his memories had been erased because of how bad things had been, Harut had no desire to recall all that had been forgotten. But the empire had absorbed 1/3 of the continent, becoming a real empire, ruled by a real emperor. Thanks to the war, Harut received the title of honorary count. While the boy was lost in his thoughts and memories, something hit the carriage very hard. When he got out of it, he saw an incomprehensible battle. Looking closer, he saw blue armbands with a white bird. Harut immediately knew that this was the Revolutionary Army, but he didn't understand how they knew. Harut immediately thought that he should join the battle because things were bad in his guard. But danger awaited him. There was a bad man next to him. He grabbed the commander by the neck and, saying that he had found the dog of the empire, threw him to the ground, pressing him with incredible force. The organization that formed during the deadly war that the emperor started was called the Revolutionary Army. In the process of conquering other countries, they lost their citizens and important people. Those people went completely crazy in their attempts to destroy the empire and the emperor. Harut, who was being pressed to the ground with all his strength, began to mentally blame the emperor because it was he who created such stupid people. The man, holding a Ruth, said he was worried about the words that the boy could be a hero, but he turned out to be a weakling. Harut replied that he was not for the Empire. The warrior released the boy and asked his name. He replied, "Dion Hart." The man grabbed him again, calling him the dog of the Empire, and the commander tried to make excuses. Harut tried to grab the dagger. As soon as the man was distracted, the boy launched his attack, but the man blocked it and pinned him to the ground again. The Revolutionary Army soldier couldn't understand why this man who called himself a hero was so weak. Could it be that all the rumors about his strength were false? Just as the warrior was about to kill Harut, some people appeared and blocked his attack. Looking at the emblems, he saw a cut on the emperor. These were the assassin ghost knights. They were devils who appeared during the war under the rule of Dion Hart. One of the knights' warriors emphasized that they couldn't just let the rebels go and asked if they should start a demonstration showdown. What was terrifying about the ghostly assassin knights wasn't their abilities, but rather the fact that they had no rationality left at all. They were a simple brute force. One of the leaders of the unit ordered to kill all the rebels. The knights began their attack. The man holding Harut and several other rebel soldiers watched this. They knew that if they faced them head-on, they would lose 100%. While the man was distracted, Harut scratched holes in his hands with his fingers. The commander threw him against the wall and couldn't believe that the boy had done that to his hand. Harut approached him again, apologized, and added that he wanted to tear her off completely, but he was too weak for that right now. Swinging his axe, he cut off the warrior's head. Even though the attacker was dead, it wasn't enough. Harut had to set an example so that people would fear him. He also attacked the other soldiers of the uprising. The commander could no longer stop. He had to make sure that everyone would remember this scene forever. One of the knights was glad for the ruthless captain, and the other asked if anyone thought he didn't really need them. But he replied that Harut had brought those fools with him. If it weren't for them, Harut would have been in big trouble. The commander, having finally dealt with the body, looked at his subordinates with crazy eyes and told them to kill everyone who remained alive. In the evening, Harut's carriage arrived at the emperor's palace. The guards were stunned because it was all covered in blood. Harut got out of the carriage. Approaching the guards, they informed him that he could not enter here without an invitation. The guy, without even looking at them, said that he was Dion Hart. Looking up at the guards, he added that he urgently needed to see Emperor Edward. The guards immediately apologized to the boy, as they knew that the emperor had given honorary Count Dion Hart permission to visit the fortress at any time. Then Harut asked where the emperor was now. The guards replied that he was celebrating the debut of a new hero in the banquet hall. Harut was delighted to hear this. In the commander's opinion, if there was a new hero in the castle, then his older brother had to be there too. In the palace, Cruel knelt before the emperor. The emperor praised him for returning the lands of the empire back to the demons. Eduardo raised his glass, saying that today they were celebrating the birth of a new hero, Cruel Hart, and it was at this moment that Harut entered the hall. People didn't know who he was, but they all thought he was very evil. However, they were even more surprised when they saw that he had white hair and red eyes. As he approached the emperor, Dion nudged his brother with his shoulder. When the boy approached Eduardo, he knelt down and said that his servant, Dion, greeted the emperor. People began to whisper about Harut. Everyone said that there were rumors that the count was a vampire. Had the family actually adopted and raised a real vampire? The other count was surprised to see that Dion had returned to the castle alive. The emperor said that they had not seen each other for a long time, but added that he had allowed Harut to come at any time. But what kind of respect can we talk about when he comes in completely covered in blood and disrupts the banquet? Harut apologized and said that he was ambushed on the way. The emperor asked who had decided to attack the hero of the empire, and he was also glad that he had sent knights to accompany him. Eduardo also added that he could see that Dion had something to say to him and suggested choosing a private place for this conversation. A few minutes later, Dion and the emperor were in another office. Eduardo asked again about the ambush and added that it was 100% the work of the revolutionaries. The emperor admired the hero of the empire, Dion Hart, and did not understand how those fools attacked the boy. No one could have reached such heights as Dion. In the vanguard, during the 8 Years' War, Dion Hart accomplished the most grandiose feat. And when he went as the hero's sidekick, he was able to pick up his corpse, which no one else could do before. A hero defeated by a demon king is usually left to feed on demons. If it weren't for Dion, the hero would have met the same fate as the others. The emperor asked if the boy understood how to break the curse. He said no. The emperor was talking about a tracking spell. The emperor began to think that Dion Hart had become much weaker due to the demon king's curse. The boy still has a careless attitude towards his health. The emperor sent him there because only the demon king can lift the curse. Eduardo said that in that case, he should return to the king, although he was completely disgusted with sending such talent to such a terrible place. The emperor asked what was happening in the castle. The boy said that he had met a murderer whom Eduardo had sent to the demon king's castle to retrieve his soul. He may have been an ordinary pawn, but he was still a candidate for hero. Harut wondered why the emperor had sent the boy to his death. The emperor replied that the boy was trash who had tarnished the title of hero. Eduardo thought that the boy would die before he reached the demon king's castle. However, thanks to that boy, Aruth's status in the castle had increased greatly. Immediately after these words, he called Dion the commander of Unit 0, the demon Aruth. The boy was stunned by how much the boy already knew. Dion stood up, bowed, and apologized to the emperor. He said he had no way of refusing such an offer. Eduardo said that everything was fine, and he didn't say it to accuse, because the better the boy was received, the easier it would be to get information from the king. Then the emperor asked why the boy had really come. Harut said that he had come because of Cruel, why the emperor had made him a new hero. The emperor knows that Dion only regrets not killing him. Cruel was the only one of the family who was able to survive Dion Hart. As a child, Dion stood looking at a family picture. Cruel approached and told him that his parents were already waiting for him for dinner. Dion apologized. The boy grabbed Cruel's hand and asked what would happen if his brother was punished because of him. Cruel let go of his hand and said that he was dirty from training. Cruel stopped in the middle of the room and asked Dion if he liked the family portrait, since he had been looking at it all day. The little boy said that's exactly what it is, because whenever he looks at him, it seems to tell him, "We are family." But Cruel replied that it was a regular drawing, so Dion shouldn't go everywhere. It's better for him to stay in his room. The boy always felt lonely in this family. One day he overheard the maids discussing how they were frightened by the boy's white hair and red eyes. But whenever Dion looked at the portrait, he began to feel like he was part of the family. He wished he had been born with black hair and green eyes like the others. Arriving at the dining room, the father announced that the boys were late, and before that he had told them that the whole family had to attend the imperial family's banquet today. The mother asked if Dion was feeling unwell again. It would be bad if the boy got sick after returning. But Dion still wanted to go with everyone. The father replied that the mother should calm down a bit. The boy couldn't stay home all the time. But the mother continued to say that she was very worried about him. The father became angry and asked if she was suggesting closing it permanently. The family never showed the child to the emperor, and this caused bad rumors to spread. Looking at the little boy, his father told him that he should always be careful on the street, that no one should find out about his shortcomings. The boy, bowing his head, replied that he would keep that in mind. Dion thought that his parents were not at all pleased with him. Cruel asked sharply if his father had changed the swordmaster. Dion was surprised that his brother had changed the subject for him, since the boy had no interest in anything before that. Immediately, the atmosphere in the dining room changed to a positive one. Dion thought his brother was truly amazing. Although the boy was not the most outstanding child, he understood that if he tried hard, he could become just like his brother. While at the banquet, a group of kids approached Dion. One of them turned to the boy and asked if it was him, Dion Hart. Harut was very happy that someone had spoken to him after such a long time, but he was also worried about what he would do if he made a mistake. The boy asked why Dion was alone. He replied that his family had gone to see his brother's swordsman. Then the boy asked if he really didn't understand anything. Immediately after that, the boy added that Dion was the white crow in the Hart family and wondered if Dion was really locked in a room so that no one would see him. Dion had white hair and red eyes that embodied terror. Even if they were his family, they couldn't love someone like Ruth. They abandoned him. Unable to bear it, Dion hit the guy in the face with all his strength and told him to stop saying that, because Ruth's family loves him very much. Immediately after that, the little boy also hit Ruth, knocking him to the ground. He asked if he really considered himself part of the Hart family. The doctor examined the boy at home. He said that the boy had a very weak body, was very sensitive to stress, and should also stay out of the sun. The mother asked if everything was that bad. The father at that time did not understand how such a weak child could be born in their family. This had never happened before. When he came to, Dion apologized to his parents and said that he would try much better in the future. Cruel approached Ruth, took his hand and said that everything would be fine. Dion began to rejoice, but after that his brother added that no one expected anything from him. Dion woke up. It was all a dream. His parents came into the room. His father was very angry. He said that he had already ordered to be careful outside the house. Harut wanted to say that the other children started the fight, but then he remembered what was happening. He decided to keep quiet, because his father wouldn't listen to him anyway. The father added that, in his opinion, it was still too early for the boy to leave the house. He would spend some time within the walls of the estate. Dion was sure they were disappointed in him. He knew he couldn't get into situations like that again. He had to try harder not to be weak. The boy was sitting in his room. From outside he heard people talking about how his parents were sad to see him, because the boy had tried so hard, but no one recognized him. Looking out the window, he saw Cruel walking with his parents. But Dion understood that he should not be jealous, but train. Today he would do it for 30 minutes longer. Night had already fallen. The boy was all wet and in tears. It was very difficult for him. He thought he was going to die now, but he still couldn't stop. He had to continue. Due to such overloads, the boy's nose began to bleed. Cruel entered the room, took his brother's sword, and shouted for him to stop. He started asking what Dion was doing. The guy replied that he was training. After that, his brother became even angrier and reminded him that he had told Dion not to do anything. The guy, with a complete emptiness in his eyes, looked at Cruel and said that he would do nothing more. No one expected anything from Dion. Dion apologized to his brother and said he was going to rest now. The boy stood by the window and thought about what to do to be loved by the family. Some time passed. Ruth was 14 and Cruel was 17. He went into Dion's room, told him that his parents had gone on business, and suggested they play chess. After Dion stopped trying, his brother would sometimes come over to play with him. Dion agreed, and Cruel asked if he had distracted the boy from his work. Dion couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his parents. He told Cruel that he couldn't have any important business in a room where there were no guests. The boys sat down at the table. Cruel added that because the country was in chaos right now, their parents were very busy. Everyone around him said that Dion's parents were very busy right now, but the boy believed that they simply did not want to see him. Although Dion knew that all the talk about being busy was a lie, there was a reason he wanted to believe it. He told his brother that he understood everything. Sometimes, when Dion is supposed to be sleeping, his mother comes to him. Even though he has sworn not to expect love from her, he begins to hope for at least some feelings. Cruel added that he wouldn't be able to come play for a while either. Dion apologized and said that it must be really hard for his brother to always find time for him. Cruel replied that he was not at all. When the war began, at least one person from the family would be called up. He had no time to prove it when people entered the room. Cruel began to ask who they were and how they dared to come here. The man replied that he was on behalf of the Empire and asked which of the boys was Dion Hart. There were 3 ambassadors from the Empire in the room. The butler, pointing to the boy, said that he was the young master, Dion Hart. The man approached Dion, grabbed his hand, and saying that he had to go with them and all the details would be a little later, pulled him along. Other people from the Empire began to wonder how such a weak boy could hold a sword. Another replied that they simply wanted to get rid of the boy in the war. Cruel approached the man, grabbed his hand, and told him to wait. Because there had been some mistake, Dion could not be in the military. The man replied that the Hart family had written all the documents for the Emperor themselves. They were just doing what they were told, and Cruella should talk to her parents about it. The boy couldn't understand what it all meant. His parents were just sending him off to war to die. Then he remembered his mother's apology, and it all immediately made sense. Dion thought everyone wanted him dead because he was a mistake that brought shame to the Hart family. As a result, his family abandoned the boy. Dion was with the others in the barracks. The man said that soon they would all be sent to the front line, and if they didn't want to die, they had to become stronger. The other warriors discussed Dion's presence in this place. They didn't understand what the boy was doing here, because all the children of wealthy families had long since moved to safe places. It seems that the rumors about the situation in the family were true. At first glance, it is clear that the boy can barely hold the sword in his hands. Most likely he will die there. The guy didn't want to die at all, but from that day on his life became a second-order hell. In war, he was surrounded by endless battles, screams from all sides, and the impossibly nauseating smell of blood. His squad leader told the boy not to sit around and whine. If he couldn't hold a sword, he should choose another weapon, and if he couldn't, he should chew his enemies. Saying that while the boy was here, he had to fight for his life, the commander threw him a small dagger, which was within the boy's reach. The crying boy picked up this weapon and immediately realized that he couldn't just die like that. He would be able to live no matter what. From that moment on, the only thing the boy did was kill, trying to cope with his weak body. He wanted to go home, but he didn't know if his home was a happy place. In the end, the boy survived. Sitting in the barracks, he heard the order to go out and receive gifts. Dion didn't know if anything had been sent to him at all, and it was also the first time he had heard of such an event since he had been here. One of the boys received a letter. It was from his daughter. She wrote it for the first time since she learned how to do it. Another was sent a home-cooked meal. Dion also received a letter. He still hoped it was from his parents. However, instead of a gift, he received a letter appointing him as commander. It was at that moment that Dion decided that the Hart family, who had sent him to this hell, would suffer the same fate. At night, a boy came to the estate. He killed one of the servants. Finally, he will do what he has been planning for a long time. The boy said that he came back to say hello. Before his parents could say a word, he killed them with a dagger. The dream he had wanted to fulfill for many years had finally come true. The guy was just crazy at that moment. He told them to look at themselves and also added that they shouldn't have done that to him at all. Cruel entered the room. He was frightened by the picture he saw. At first, the guy wanted to ask for help, but then he rushed in with a dagger. The battle came to a sudden halt. The boy dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. He had reached his limit, his body failing again, but he couldn't faint here. Dion woke up abruptly, and Reinel, the commander of the highest knights, stood before him. She asked what the Count was thinking. Dion greeted the girl. Leon was the only normal person among the other crazy knights. The guy was very happy to see her. But the boy didn't understand where he was, because on the way to the palace he was ambushed by the Revolutionary Army. But when he found himself in the palace and changed clothes, he didn't remember. The guy didn't understand when he had managed to meet the Emperor and how he was able to cope with the Revolutionary Army. But now was not the time for all that. Dion asked what the reason for the banquet was. The girl replied that everything was arranged in honor of the new hero of the Empire. This festive banquet was to celebrate the birth and debut of a new hero, Cruel Heart. It was at this time that Cruel approached Dion. Harut was not at all happy about what he heard. He immediately realized that it was not for nothing that he had seen such horror. Unlike Dion, Cruel had green eyes and black hair, a distinctive feature of the Hart family that Dion never thought he would see again. Dion greeted his brother, but he immediately began to tell him that on a previous expedition he had met the commander of the Zero unit of the demon army. Dion worried that his brother would realize it was him. But Cruel noticed that Dion, in raising the spirits of his warriors, immediately reminded him of his brother. Cruel also added that he had heard about Dion's ability to raise the morale of the team and would like to see him in their army. Hearing this, Dion laughed out loud, apologized, and said he couldn't help himself. It sounded so ridiculous. He looked Cruella in the eye and added that he saw no reason to fight on their side, and his brother should stop making up such scenarios. Cruel agreed, but saw in Dion's eyes the same indifference and lack of interest as before. Dion asked if it was time for the important guests to leave, noting that he would enjoy the evening before leaving, and that Cruel shouldn't worry about him. Dion didn't like the banquet at all, but he needed to kill time before leaving. Cruel asked about the mission his brother was on. He asked if Dion was hurt. These words angered the boy, and he asked why everyone was annoying him, because he could take care of himself. They shouldn't pretend to care about him. Even if he had been injured on the job, they certainly wouldn't have told anyone. So let them continue to watch from the sidelines, as they always did, just as Cruel did when his brother was taken to war. Cruel wanted to apologize, but he was interrupted by Duke Illustrious Strabe, who approached the boys with words about the touching relationship between the brothers. Dion knew that this Duke led the opposition against the Emperor. Cruel bowed to the Duke, but the Duke said that formalities were unnecessary. He turned to Dion, asking if this was the first time they had met in person, and added that he had heard a lot about his exploits, so it was nice to meet him. The Duke extended his hand to him, but Dion only looked at it and ignored it. Cruel did not understand his brother's behavior. The boy knew he had to say something, but there was pudding in his mouth, which he had to chew and swallow quietly. Looking at the Duke, Harut understood that he would be furious now, so he decided to simply shake his hand and open his mouth later. The crown prince of the empire, Elpidious Desert, also came to the hall, who approached and greeted the Duke, saying that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. The guy didn't understand if it was a coincidence that everyone had come, but it didn't matter. He needed to say hello to him too. The Duke began to apologize to Elpidious for his long absence, but the Crown Prince said that it was his own fault, as he should have invited him long ago. Dion was trying to eat the pudding when the Princess of the Alethea Desert Empire rushed up to him from behind, saying that he should have called her to meet the Count. Just as the girl was about to say how much she missed Dion, the boy fell to his knees, blood starting to flow from his mouth. The Crown Prince called a doctor. There was actually no blood there. When the princess hugged Dion with all her strength, red pudding flew out of his mouth and fell to the floor. Dion began to make excuses, trying to say that he didn't need a doctor at all, but Leanne covered his mouth with a napkin and asked him not to chatter. At that moment, the Emperor entered the room, accompanied by the first hero of the Empire, General Nemesius. The Emperor asked what the commotion was. The princess approached the Emperor and said that it was her fault. The Count was bleeding because of her, because she could not control her strength, because she was happy to see the boy. Elpidious said that he would punish the princess a little later, to which the Emperor replied that they should stop, because a hero cannot bleed over such trifles. The Emperor added that Dion was attacked on the way to the palace, most likely an internal injury due to fatigue. The Emperor approached Aruth and asked if the imperial doctor should be called. The young man, realizing that this needed to be brought to an end, replied that it was not necessary. The Emperor began to say that it was because of the Demon King's curse. The boy, realizing that there were no excuses, wanted to pretend to be sick. Dion walked closer to the Emperor, bowed and said he'd better go. He didn't know if it was all stress, but he really didn't feel well. He began to apologize for not being able to stay until the end, and at that moment he began to lose consciousness. He was grabbed by Cruel. Dion, not seeing who did it, thanked him, but then pushed his brother's hand away, saying that he didn't need help. Dion didn't understand why his brother was behaving like that. During the 8 Years' War, Cruel was the object of Dion's hatred. How can he now pretend to care about the boy? The Emperor approached Aruth, took him by the shoulder, and said that because the boy was feeling unwell, he should go home. The Emperor expels the boy. Under normal circumstances, this would be an insult to him, but in this situation, it is a display of tact. The Duke and Cruel were walking down the street. The Duke did not understand at all why the Emperor tolerated and treated Dion so well. Returning to Cruel, he also added that he was too soft on his brother. Cruel replied that he simply didn't want to spoil the atmosphere in front of the guests. The Duke told him not to worry, because he had understood everything correctly. Once Cruel came to the Duke with an offer to become his sponsor. The Duke asked the boy if he had heard everything correctly. Cruel was an unfortunate man who had lost his family at the hands of his younger brother. The boy said that if he agreed, he would become a sword in his hands. The Duke replied that he was not so stupid as to refuse a faithful dog who came with requests, but he wondered why it was asking for him. Of all the people, Cruel chose him. The Duke could not tell whether he was intelligent or very stupid. The Duke had always wondered what exactly Cruel wanted to protect, but today he finally understood everything for himself. And Cruel wanted only one thing. He wanted to protect himself from his brother, Dion Hart. Cruel replied that the Duke understood everything correctly. The Duke said that in that case their paths would cross. He wanted to kill Dion not only because he was the Emperor's dog, but because he posed a great danger. Duke realized that he had to kill Dion Hart no matter what. Dion arrived at the estate. His subordinate asked if he was sure he didn't need help. The guy replied that everything would be fine. He just needed to rest a bit. As he got out of the carriage, the boy smelled something roasting. Everything had been fine while they were driving, so he couldn't understand why. When he arrived home, he found the house burned down. Near the house were the tallest knights. The boy began to think that he was imagining it all, that it was all an illusion due to the great amount of stress he had endured today. The boy began to ask the knights what was happening here, and when his estate had become a zoo for mad dogs. During this, a bomb fell into his hands. Realizing that it was actually an explosive, the boy barely managed to throw it away, but he still didn't understand what all those crazy dogs had forgotten here. A man appeared in front of Dion. He called the guy a real hero because he immediately threw the bomb that he threw at him as an unexpected attack. Dion saw the Revolutionary Army badge on the scoundrel's arm. The knights said that those scum had thrown a bomb into the guy's house, so they came and dealt with them. Then Dion said that he had heard that the highest knights had been added to the official knights of the Empire, and wondered if they had been expelled because they were problematic. The boys immediately hugged the captain because he cared about them, and said that even though they might have been problematic, no one kicked them out. The girl began to scold the knights, asking how they could be so disrespectful, since they were the only ones who did this to the count. But Dion was not up to it. He couldn't understand why they hadn't just attacked the boy, that they decided to do it to his personal knights as well. The guy saw one of the revolutionaries being taken away by his partner and running away with him, and immediately realized that he had to chase them if he wanted to get information. He had no time to even start running when someone grabbed the boys. Looking closely, Dion saw Remember holding the boys, saying that they had almost lost them. Remember approached Harut and said he was stunned, thought the guy was in danger, but then saw him throw the bomb away. And then he asked if something had happened in the Imperial Castle, since it had only been half a day and the boy was already tired. Dion said that everything was fine. The girl approached Remember and reported that Aruth had been attacked by revolutionaries, so she thinks the boy has internal injuries. The butler turned to Dion again and told him to go rest, and he would take care of everything else himself. Three people stand on the way to the Emperor: the commander-in-chief of the 8 Years' War, as well as the Emperor's personal bodyguard Nemesis, as well as the commander of the vanguard in the war, as well as the Emperor's loyal dog, Dion Hart. He usually operates from the shadows, making his presence difficult to track. This time the guy went on a monster-killing mission, but who knows what mission he signed up for behind closed doors. One of the revolutionaries said that despite his failure, the Revolutionary Army would never give up, and called the knight a dog, which made him very angry. Since the beginning of the war, none of the highest knights had raised their sword in the name of the Emperor. They had always done so for Dion Hart. Immediately after these words, the knight killed one of the revolutionaries. Remember was not happy to see this, because now he would have to clean up even more. Remember decided to tell Dion Hart that the revolutionary died because his wild dog bit him to death. A poor little girl was sitting on the streets of the city. She was very hungry. After one of the men scolded her, she ate nothing at all. Since people were dying there all the time, her death would not come as a surprise to anyone. At that moment, a boy approached her and said that the girl looked like a corpse. The guy's name was Paul, and saying that there was nothing you could do in this situation, the guy held out his hand to her, which contained a piece of bread. The girl was very surprised by such a find. She began to ask where Paul got it from. The guy replied that he brought it from the church. The girl asked about the church, to which the boy replied that they visited the townspeople and gave people free bread and water. The fact that it was free surprised the girl. She asked if there was anything inside. Paul said that their neighbor had already eaten his and nothing happened to him. The girl replied that the man would eat anything that was free. Then Paul said that he had been thinking about her all week, because she had not eaten anything. The girl continued not to believe Paul's words, after which the guy got up and, saying that he would go to church again, started walking. After waiting a little, the girl shouted for Paul to wait for her. She would go with him. It didn't matter what the girl died of, whether from poison or from hunger. If they really do provide food, as they say, then it doesn't matter whether they bring a curse to the children or save them. Harut returned to the Empire a week ago. The part of the estate that was burning was put in order, and the knights received a personal review from the commander. Harut was dealing with the backlog. He asked Remember if anyone was serious about building another dam on Hart's property. After that, he asked the butler who suggested such nonsense. The man replied that it was him. Dion immediately changed his shoes, saying that it was a good idea. After the incident with the rebels, Harut could not behave carelessly towards Remember. If it weren't for him, everything in the estate would have burned down. Outside the window, he heard the knights arguing. The boy expected something like this to happen, because the knights of the estate and the highest ones don't get along with each other. Dion asked, "Remember if the highest knights had nothing to do?" The man replied that the emperor constantly sent them on various missions, but because they were back under Harut's command, until the boy gave them a job, they would do nothing but argue. Dion asked why only the emperor had brought those fools back to him. Remember replied that it was all because of His Majesty's concern. Dion was surprised. The commander asked if the subordinate was tired and told him to say if he needed a day off. The man refused and asked Dion not to say that. Remember asked if the return of family knights wasn't standard practice to prevent treason. Without trust, there would be no army. However, Dion had a completely different opinion. The boy believed that the emperor simply could not cope with them, because wild dogs would not become obedient even in such situations. Dion asked why he had so many overdue lands. From that day, Dion had given the emperor the name Hart, why he wouldn't take all these lands for himself. The subordinate replied that perhaps Dion did not know about it, but His Majesty transferred the right to the personal name back to the boy. The guy was outraged by these words. It was the first time he had heard this information. Remember began to look for an official document where all this was written down. Dion was very disappointed because he had let go of the title of Count bestowed upon him for the sake of some kind of border protection. But he still doesn't need the Hart surname, because the guy didn't have any good memories associated with it, only the worst. Standing up, the boy emphasized that he wouldn't just leave it like that. He needed to visit the emperor as soon as possible. When Dion was about to leave his office, one of his charges said that the crown prince and General Nemesius had come to see him. Hearing this, Dion sat back in his chair. He could not understand why the general and the prince had come to him. The general and the prince stood by the closed painting. Nemesius immediately realized that it was a family portrait. Although Dion had moved to a new estate, he had taken the painting with him. The crown prince turned to Aruth. The boy apologized for coming unannounced, but he wanted to speak specifically to the count. At his estate, the crown prince was reading a newspaper and chatting with the princess. The newspaper reported that Dion had caught an army of revolutionaries with his bare hands. Returning to the princess, the boy asked why she was so sad, to which the girl replied that she was sure that Dion did not want to see her anymore. It was all over. The crown prince began to say that, in his opinion, the princess's efforts were insufficient. The girl interrupted him and said that although she was a princess, she had not seduced anyone. However, she never wanted to cause such problems. Because of her, the count started spitting blood. The guy replied that it was not her fault. The princess began to ask if he should apologize. The boy immediately understood what she wanted, but denied their meeting in life. They were allowed everything, but not this. It doesn't matter whether she comes to him or he to her. It will be a scandal. The princess replied that it would be even better. She would take advantage of it to marry him. To put it mildly, the girl was a naive, but in reality a stupid princess. She didn't love the boy. It was all just a created image to deceive. However, the princess did not want to listen to him. She replied that perhaps she did not love him, but for the sake of the imperial family she could do it. The crown prince said that if the girl showed him how logical she thought, her image of a foolish princess would immediately begin to arouse suspicion. The girl replied that everything was fine, and they should stay together until the end, because everyone was already discussing who would get the throne. Their plan was still in effect. She has already shown her feelings for the guy. No one will dare to encroach on him, because if they tie such a talent to the imperial family. Before she could agree, her brother interrupted her, saying that she had her reasons for doing so because she didn't have good intuition. The guy knew that this wasn't the first time he had repeated these words. He was just emphasizing again that the girl could end it all at any moment. The girl thanked him and asked if the crown prince could ask what Count Hart thought of her. They will be in a very difficult position if the emperor's precious talent is disappointed by this incident. The crown prince understood that they were at the estate to inquire whether the boy was disappointed by the princess's behavior. But if they were here, why not make Dion work for the emperor? Sitting at the table, Harut didn't understand what these two had forgotten in his house. Dion asked if he could ask what brought them here. The crown prince said he wanted to discuss something, and the general also had a few questions for the boy. Looking at the general, Harut saw that he was ready to tear him apart with his gaze. Did the general really hate the guy so much? First, the crown prince wanted to apologize, and he wanted to do so not only for the unexpected visit, but also for the banquet. The princess had behaved very badly at it, but he added that he had punished her. Dion replied that this was also a minor incident for an apology. The crown prince was glad that the duke was not angry with them. After that, the prince said that he had come here to ask Dion to do something. The man wanted them to become friends. The crown prince wants to be closer to Aruth, but the boy is always busy, so they can't see each other often. Dion was surprised that the prince was here for this. The title of crown prince is too heavy. A man cannot even pay a friendly visit to the person with whom he wants to establish a relationship. That's why he came under the pretext of apologizing for his sister's behavior. He asked if a request of this kind was too stupid for Dion. The general looked at the boy as if he was ready to kill him if he refused, so the boy had no choice but to say that he would be honored to be the man's friend. The prince was very happy. He asked if they were friends from that day on, and added that from now on he would do absolutely everything to make them closer. He continued to say that he was very happy to have become friends with the person the Emperor valued most. Dion was not happy, but replied that he was too. It was obviously a lot of pressure for Aruth, but he didn't give up. Contrary to rumors, the guy had a good heart. The crown prince would actually be happy to get along with him. Finally, the man added that Dion would come to his place every time he visited the imperial palace. They would spar, drink tea, and talk. The cunning prince, saying that he had heard the desired answer, began to leave, adding that there was no need to see him off, because the general was still waiting for Dion. At the door, the prince turned back to the boys and told the general that he would go to the palace himself, who wished him a safe journey. Dion and the general were left alone. The silence was broken by the man, who said that they had not greeted each other in such a way for a long time. Immediately after that, he said that he did not want to delay, so he came here to inform that the Emperor wanted to see the revolutionary who was at the estate. The goal of this is to determine his identity and determine the location of their base, but Harut has the right to refuse, since he was the one who caught him. Dion was glad that the general got down to business right away, because he didn't want to talk to him for long either. The guy called him over and said he would take him to the prisoner. The guys went down to the basement. One of the revolutionaries was taken out of the cage to the general. Dion said that he was tied up, so he could be taken away. The general said that 3 people attacked the house, 2 of whom were dead. Although reports indicate that only 1 died in the explosion, the cause of death of the other is unknown. Dion wondered what exactly the general meant by these words, to which the general asked if the count knew how the second man died. A general doesn't hate people without a reason. During the war, for the first time, a nobleman was called up to serve as a soldier, and the boy was sent to the general's unit. A child who was too weak to survive in a war zone chose cruelty as a defense, which is what drove him crazy. The general approached the twisted guy in the barracks and said that he had been sitting here like this for 3 days. It was time to come to his senses. It was his way of survival. No one will blame the guy for it, but if he made such a decision, then he must accept the guilt that comes with it. The guy asked what the general was talking about. If he was talking about the wound, then everything was fine. The general replied that he wasn't talking about that at all. He was talking about the battle before that. The child, who suffered from guilt after every battle, finally split his personality. The boy looked at the general and said that he didn't understand what he was talking about. His madman personality manifested itself during fierce battles, while in calm times Dion was normal. He claimed to be too tired and could not remember anything. The general at the cage rephrased the question, asking if Dion remembered how another person died. The general wondered how much longer the boy would deceive himself, ignoring his own actions. The man found him disgusting for abandoning his humanity. Dion replied that he wasn't there, so he couldn't say anything, but he heard that wild dogs had torn him to pieces. The general turned around and said he was leaving. He expected that Dion had not changed at all since the war. The general considered the words about the dogs nonsense, being sure that Dion himself killed the boy, using his crazy personality. The weakness of those who bear such responsibility can lead to disaster. The general did not understand why the emperor still kept the boy by his side. The boy woke up in his chair, with Remember standing next to him. Harut said he must have switched off because he just wanted to rest a little. He asked Remember if he had been waiting for him and how long he had slept. Remember replied that he had not slept for very long. The butler asked how the boy was feeling. He was afraid that he had fainted and called a doctor to examine him. The doctor explained that the cause could be stress and fatigue due to a weak body. The guy was not surprised because his blood pressure often rises. Because of this, Remember proposed a good idea. Send the highest knights on an expedition to kill monsters. The guy agreed, thinking the idea was great. Remember was delighted and said he would send them to the monster's nest near the estate. Dion asked the butler to arrange everything as soon as possible. These mad dogs would finally be out of sight. and he would be able to breathe easy. So thought the boy. But within a few hours, the Count and his army of knights were almost at the border. Dion could not believe that he had been dragged there too. Dion began to wonder why he was there. One of the knights asked how the boy could miss such a fun task. The boy couldn't understand what was so funny about this task. At first he wanted to refuse, but the knight began to beg him to be with them. The guy told Remember that he would fill out the papers, but he replied that he would do it himself so that Dion could rest. The boy began to make excuses, but Remember asked if the boy left. Wouldn't that fool in the county make his move? He also added that he would catch this rat, so the guy should go and take a break from the paperwork. That's what Remember said, and Dion couldn't refuse. But they really had to catch the spy, or the boy might die quickly. One of the knights said that they were the only ones here, so there was no need to be shy. He had heard Dion arrive with a big smile after his last expedition. At this time, monsters began to attack the group. Telling the commander not to hold back, the knight rushed to attack the demonic monsters. After some time, a tired Leon drove up to the guy. The girl Dion was recommended by the Emperor himself. She sets the standards for others. Lady Leon could easily have joined any knightly order. The boy was embarrassed. Leon asked if he would join the battle. The boy replied that he would rather let the knights have fun. The girl was pleasantly surprised by Dion's tactics. One of the knights asked if Harut would join them, as they were enjoying the commander's leave better than he was. Dion said he would figure it out himself. The boy had a feeling that if he got involved in the fight, something would be destroyed. While he was thinking about this, an arrow hit his shoulder. If the boy hadn't turned around, the arrow would have hit him in the neck. Where did it come from? Was it an ambush? But if so, who set it up? These were definitely not representatives of other countries, and if not them, then they were assassins who were sent to eliminate Dion Hart. The guy called them disgusting fools and asked Leon to cut the arrow as close as possible so it wouldn't be visible. Leanne replied that if she did that, the guy would be badly hurt when the tip was removed. But judging by his mood, he wouldn't do it again. The arrowhead will penetrate deeper and deeper, causing Dion to feel unbearable pain. Two men were watching the boys. One of them asked if the fool who had been wounded was the third hero of the Empire, Dion Hart. Another replied that judging by his blonde hair and the fact that there were ghost knights with him, it was most likely him. The man didn't understand what was happening there. He thought it was an internal conflict, because after being wounded, Dion didn't start to pull himself together. Only 2 years had passed since the end of the war, and Dion Hart was wounded. The man was sure that the Empire did not want war now. The man decided that if he accused those people of attacking his kingdom, they would receive considerable reparations from the Empire. At this time, Dion was given pills, which he immediately took. Leanne began to wonder what exactly he had taken, and Dion said that it temporarily turned off his common sense. The leader of the attackers ordered his men to attack Dion. The guy jumped on one of the bad guys and started hitting him with daggers. Dion quickly realized if he was able to catch one of the guys alive, then he sees no point in the lives of the others. Dion called Leon to him and ordered the girl to make sure that the villain remained alive. One of the knights decided not to finish off the bad guy, but Dion did it instead. The knights were very surprised by such actions on his part. After that, the commander asked if they were wild dogs on the battlefield who had become knights, and because of that began to show great mercy. He also asked if they had taken the pills, as they were still weak. If they were not capable of that, then none of them would be able to survive in such conditions. It's not like they have a talent for granting forgiveness to their enemies and letting them live. Didn't the boy tell them that every time? They should let go of the guilt. They should be left with only the ability to distinguish enemy from friend and allow madness to consume their souls. All this will be for the sake of survival. The attackers already realized that they had chosen the wrong opponent and began to regret having been so greedy. One of the assistants asked Cruel if they would really be given half the reward if they injured Dion. Cruel replied that he had only added a small point to the task, But the order was to kill Dion. Why did they pay out of their own pockets for such a condition? The assistant replied to the hero that he would take all responsibility, so Cruel could not worry about anything. Cruel probably hates Heart the most, but he does strange things from time to time. It's unclear what his brother wants from him. It was an incredibly bloody battle, full of dirty tricks, an incredibly brutal massacre. The man at the epicenter, the way his eyes shone as he tore his enemies to pieces, looked like a bloody ghost. And such a person was actually a defender of the Empire. The attackers should not have interfered in this matter from the very beginning. It was no wonder they were called Deadly Ghost Knights, not Supreme. It was hard to stay sane after such battles. Dion doesn't know if the attackers were blinded by money, or simply stupid by nature, or maybe it was all of the above, but after such actions, they had no right to live. Approaching one of the bad guys, Dion said that he wasn't thrilled about the torture either, so he just wanted to hear who was behind these orders. Meanwhile, the Emperor has received a complaint from the Kingdom of Ilion. Count Dion Hart is there, suppressing monsters near the border. The kingdom insists that the battle they were drawn into as a result of an ambush near the castle is an invasion. The Emperor asked if Dion was okay. The man who reported the information to the Emperor said that the Count had been wounded in the shoulder by an arrow, and the boy would have difficulty using it for about a month. Having understood everything, the Emperor asked his subordinate whether, after all this, the Kingdom of Ilion needed some compensation. This made the Emperor very angry, and said that they should at least have brains if they lacked brawn. Eduardo had been acting too quietly all this time. The aide said they could accuse the Ilion Kingdom of setting up an ambush to corner them. However, the Emperor refused. Eduardo sat down more comfortably, and with a sly face ordered them to prepare for war against the kingdom. The subordinate began to say that it was not possible to start a war, since only 2 years had passed. However, the Emperor was not interested in this. The Empire could receive resources. After all, that's what they did during the 8 Years' War, so there's no reason why it wouldn't work now. The Emperor emphasized that he was a tyrant. At the end, he also added that he planned to conquer an entire continent, so this all fits very closely with the Emperor's plans. The Emperor was obsessed with responsibility due to a sense of guilt, and his responsibility becoming a prison caused a disaster. Even though it doesn't hurt to be responsible, the Emperor prioritized his guilt for killing his siblings, which is wrong. The Chancellor replied that he would secretly draw up a budget for the operation. The Emperor replied that he would also get to work and asked if the general had heard of the church. After saying the name again, the general asked if it was a cult that was gaining momentum among the slum dwellers. With the country in chaos, he can understand the population turning to faith for solace. But the church has become too powerful, so before the war begins, it must be removed so as not to pose a threat to the operation. The Emperor began to think about who could best handle this task and who knew how to do it. He would order Dion to deal with it. Because this is a showdown with a small group of fanatics, Count Dion Hart should be able to pull it off, even despite his injuries. But the Emperor forgot that Nemesis had always been hostile to Dion. He immediately began to say that Dion was a dangerous man. The Emperor replied that Nemesis absolutely hated this guy and asked if it was because of his brutal elimination of enemies. Nemesis said that this was not true at all, as it was just his way of survival. However, Count Dion Hart had split himself into 2 completely different personalities. This fool's mental health is like a sandcastle, because he can't even handle personal responsibility. Once the boy comes to terms with reality, the wall he has built will completely collapse. The Emperor, without showing any emotion, asked what all this was about, and then he added that he knew everything about it, and that this decision should be made by Dion himself. Even if something happens because of him, it will be his responsibility. The general began to shout and ask how the Emperor could say such a thing. If the sword is broken, it will affect the ruler as well. The responsibility may fall on the Emperor. Eduardo replied that it was all nonsense, and that was the Emperor's job. Nemesis tried to stop the man, but he said that enough talk. Eduardo knows that he has chosen the path of a tyrant, but he can become a great ruler for those he values and respects. And he will also forgive the general for his disdain, since he is not so competent that he cannot magnanimously forgive the mistake of a loyal subordinate. It's not that the Emperor doesn't understand Nemesis's fears, so he shouldn't worry. The Emperor keeps such a dangerous man for a good reason. Dion had a crystal-clear sense of hatred, murderous intent, and a rage that could not be described in ordinary words. He had been harboring hatred for his family for 8 years, ever since he was taken away and sent to war at the age of 14. For Earl Hart, the Emperor who had staged a coup for the throne was a pleasant example. The Emperor had no reason to refuse. When Dion asked for permission to kill his family, the Emperor did not refuse, after which the Count asked about the next steps. The Emperor ordered him to confront the Demon King as an ally of the hero. Dion surprised everyone by bringing back the dead hero's corpse. With an achievement like that, even without the hero fragment, Dion Hart will have to be recognized as a hero. However, was this his fate? Cruel returned late that night to find that Dion had killed the people of the county and survived. And it was after this that Cruel Hart became the Emperor's trump card against Dion Hart. Whatever the reason, Dion killed his own family. The only one left is Cruel. Dion still needs the Emperor to get rid of his brother. Cruel, in turn, serves Duke Illustra for his own survival. The two brothers have each other at their throats. Therefore, as long as Cruel Hart is alive, Dion Hart will always be on the Emperor's side and will fulfill his every whim. During the battle, the boy began to gradually regain consciousness. He did not understand what was happening, but his second personality ordered him to forget everything. The boy woke up in the carriage. It seemed like he was dreaming. He only remembered how they arrived at the border, and the killer put an arrow in his shoulder. As he got out of the carriage, the boy didn't realize when they had returned while he was unconscious. The situation had already been resolved, but he didn't remember anything. If it weren't for the wound in his shoulder, Dion would have thought it was all a bad dream. He asked his other subordinates where Remember was. A few hours ago, Remember had caught one of the spies. He had expected this, but he had no idea it would be this man. He began to question the spy about the customer, but the spy just shouted, and the butler decided to kill the villain so as not to waste time. But Remember reassured himself that this man was not the only source of information, so it didn't matter so much whether he was alive or not. One of Remember's subordinates approached him and told him that Dion had returned. The butler ordered the man to follow the bird and find out. Looking at the corpse, Remember remembered something. Taking out the papers, he threw them at the boy, saying that he was canceling the employment contract with the authority of the butler. Already at the estate, Remember approached Dion and asked if the boy was okay. The Count replied that the arrow had hit his left shoulder, so everything was fine. Remember was happy because it meant the boy could continue to write documents. Dion wondered if Remember was injured, because he smelled of blood. Remember asked if Dion felt it and said that he had just dealt with the spy. Probably some drops of blood got on the suit. The butler said that he wanted to catch the guy alive, but it didn't work out, and apologized. Dion replied that everything was fine, and there was no need to apologize for that. The butler asked if Dion had been able to learn anything from the killer. The guy replied that everyone there had died too, so he hadn't gotten any information. Remember began to wonder who could have done this, and came to the conclusion that it all came down to the revolutionaries and the head of the nobility, Duke Illustra. Dion would not be able to cope with such an opponent on his own, so the butler suggested that the boy turn to the Emperor for help. Remember also added that if he crossed the line, he apologizes for it. Dion was planning to visit the Emperor and return his estate anyway, so he might as well get it all over with before he got into any more trouble. Dion arrived at the Emperor's palace, but Eduardo was having a private meeting with Duke Illustra. Dion had to wait a while. The guy thought he could see him right away, but there was nothing he could do. He needed to kill some time somehow. Leaving the Emperor's office, Dion saw the Crown Prince with the princess, whom his brother was holding so that she wouldn't attack the boy. Dion bowed to them and said, "Dion Hart welcomes the future of the Empire." The Crown Prince, smiling, replied that there was no need for that. They were friends. He also added that he had heard, walking down the corridor, that Dion needed something to do before meeting the Emperor. A few minutes later, they were drinking tea. Sitting at the table, Dion said that it was a great honor for him to spend time with them, and in his mind he said that if he had known that he would meet, he would have arrived later. The Crown Prince said that he would give Dion tea because he saw that he liked it. The princess, saying, "You can't just drink tea like that," gave him a cookie. The Crown Prince heard that Dion was injured, so he had to be more careful because of the king's curse. He asked why the boy went on raids so often. The boy choked a little and started coughing. The prince said that the boy should be more careful, because he still had a long time to serve the emperor. But what Dion heard later completely threw him off track. The Crown Prince said he didn't want to be the next emperor at all. Dion was uncomfortable. He is the Crown Prince now, and there is nothing he can do about it. But shouldn't he prepare to abdicate when the emperor does? And if he does have to take the throne, it will only be in the event that something happens to the emperor. The Crown Prince hopes that this will never happen. He continued to say that, as Dion already knew, the emperor was like a brother to them, so they wished him only the best and happiness. And the boy knew how much the Crown Prince and his sister princess respected their uncle emperor. If you recall, the emperor killed his siblings and their children. It is difficult to explain the peaceful existence of the Crown Prince and princess. And it was also strange that they did not feel hatred towards their uncle. However, there was one reason: their father, the first prince. He was kind, unlike most of the imperial family. Kind even to the current emperor, who had no hope of the throne. Until his death, he visited the 9th prince with his children, so they value each other like brothers and sisters. Their relationship was much closer even compared to ordinary family relationships. Some even say that if the first prince were alive, the 9th would never have taken up a sword and done such things to his family. The Crown Prince is worried about His Majesty, who bears the entire weight of governance on his shoulders, so he asks Dion to take care of him. The princess asked her brother why he was pressuring the count with such things. Dion asked to go to the toilet. The prince, of course, let the guy go. As the boy was leaving, the Crown Prince realized that he had run away. The princess agreed and said that the dialogue was too difficult for him. Something lurks beneath the deceptive surface of the water. The sharpness of the sword is always pointed towards their uncle, the emperor. The prince will help Dion take the throne. Not that the Crown Prince succumbed to such nonsense, but their appeasement over the course of 2 years turned into an appeasement with hidden danger. They don't know when they will decide to provoke, so they have to make a decision now. The emperor needs someone who will silently be on his side. Since Dion is an outstanding person, only his participation on their side can help turn the situation around, and that is what the princess persuades him to do. Laughing, the Crown Prince said that he hoped that Count Dion Hart would become a loyal ally of His Majesty the Emperor. So loyal that no matter who stands in the Emperor's way, even if it's nobility, he can kill them all without question. The guy was walking around the estate and didn't understand at all where he should look for the restroom, since he was leaving immediately after visiting the Emperor, and he didn't understand where he was now. A boy was coming out of one of the offices. Harut noticed him and called for help. However, the boy was very scared. Dion didn't understand why. Harut, smiling, asked if the man knew where he was. The boy became even more frightened, took out a dagger and stabbed Dion in the arm with it. The man thought that Dion had asked that because he had outsmarted him. He had finally managed to steal the documents after many failures, and in the end, it was this Dion Hart who caught him. His chances of survival were close to 0, even if the boy tried to escape, so he had to attack when Dion least expected it. However, the robber was pulled out of his thoughts when someone grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up. It was Cruel Hart. Dion was surprised that his brother had saved him, but he didn't understand what he was doing here. The boy had never expected to see him within the castle walls. Cruel saw the wound on his brother's arm and squeezed the robber even tighter. Some documents fell out of his hands. Just as Dion tried to pick them up, Illuster approached. After reading it, he said that it was a very important document, and added that he had just spoken with the emperor, but he had not expected to see Count Dion as well. Looking at the boy, Illustrious asked if he had also come to see the emperor. Dion replied that he wanted to ask something of his majesty. The illustrator looked at the robber and said that the boy had caught a spy within the walls of the estate. Doesn't that mean that the emperor is now in his debt? But he added that he wasn't going to take away the boy's fame, so he didn't have to worry, because he could have done it even without the help of his brother, Cruel Heart. The princess and the crown prince also joined the dialogue. He said that they went to look for the boy because he had not returned to them for a long time. Approaching the boy, he began to shout for someone to call the imperial doctor. At this time, Dion's nose was bleeding. He tried to hide it. Dion started to say that everything was fine with him, but the prince replied that the doctor would be here soon and asked what had happened. Cruel approached Illuster and said that Dion had been wounded while dealing with the spy. The count replied that the weapon might have been poisoned. Dion was getting worse. The princess begged him not to faint. A scream was heard from the corridor. A doctor ran to the company with the words that there must be a patient here somewhere. Seeing Dion, the man was disappointed. During the feast, he had already run to help the boy, but when he arrived at the place, no one was there. The doctor began to examine Dion. The crown prince approached him and asked if the boy had been poisoned. The doctor replied that everything was fine and the wound was not very deep. After these words, the prince grabbed him and, saying that the boy had just vomited blood, asked if he had examined him carefully. The doctor said that he had done everything well. General Nemesis also came to this whole scene. Bowing, he said that everything was due to the curse of the Demon King. Dion did not understand why there were so many people here. Nemesis has come to deliver a message, as His Majesty has summoned the Honorable Earl Dion Hart to his presence. Dion thought that Nemesis was once again looking at him with disgust and humiliation, but replied that since the Emperor was waiting for him, he must go. As the boy was leaving, he turned to the Crown Prince and said that he was grateful for his work, but he didn't need to worry about him so much. The prince began to think that the boy thought that no one needed to take care of him, because he thought that there was no way to lift the king's curse. Meanwhile, Illuster and Cruel were sitting in the carriage. The count remembered the document. It was the budget for the war. Even though the emperor said that nothing would happen, we had to be careful. He decided that in order to achieve his goals, this time he would especially help the emperor's plans. Dion was sitting with the emperor in his office. The man said that the guy didn't look very good, and he also heard that Dion had captured a spy. He asked if Harut was seriously injured. The boy replied that he was fine. However, the emperor could see that this was not the case, for Dion was very nervous. The emperor did not question Dion further about what had happened, but added that the boy should not hide his condition, because he was the empire's most valuable talent. Surprisingly, the guy really felt very good, but there was one but. He had to go to the restroom. The emperor asked why the boy had come to him. Dion replied that it was about the Hart surname, but the man refused without even listening. The boy then wanted to ask about the knights. The emperor replied that it also concerned them. Dion tried to ask for his resignation, which was refused. The emperor said that sometimes Dion asks for stupid things, but if he fulfills the request, the emperor will do it too. He gave the boy a document, and Dion asked what kind of church it was. The emperor explained that it was a cult that had emerged in the jungle, and Dion had to destroy it. Dion wanted to refuse, but the emperor informed him that this task had also been given to Cruel. Before he could prove it, Dion had already agreed. The guy understood that he had been led astray by a stupid provocation, but he didn't know what his brother could ask for, and decided to stop him. The emperor looked at Dion and said that he would grant the wish of whoever completed this task first, Dion or Cruel. Dion immediately replied that at any cost he would be the first to complete the task and defeat his brother. At the estate, Dion was sitting and working on papers. Remember brought him tea, and the guy joked that he had only been drinking tea lately. Remember wondered if it was the same drink Dion had enjoyed with the crown prince and had received as a gift. The boy also had to drink the elixir that the doctor gave for the common good. Remember assured that it would have a good effect on Dion's feelings and assured him that there was no poison, because he had checked. However, Dion said that it wasn't the poison, but that he didn't like bitter things. But Remember had prepared sweets. At that moment, Leanne entered the room and said she was back. Dion asked how the investigation had ended. He also asked if they had learned anything about the church. Leanne replied that it was a cult that was gaining popularity in the slums. They gather believers, offer free water and food, but do not demand allegiance or donations. However, they are asked to spread the belief in redemption. Dion asked if this concept was too vague. Remember said that such gifts cost them a lot. They are sponsored by several nobles, but it is very expensive. Dion did not understand their true purpose, because they did not want money or the role of religious leaders. In any case, the boy began to move towards the edge of the room, intending to go to the restroom first. Leanne misunderstood that he wanted to investigate to set an example for others. She added that she would accompany the boy because of the danger. Dion did not understand where she wanted to take him. Leanne didn't understand Dion's question and thought it was a bit silly, so she replied that they would go to the Church of Redemption. A few hours later, they were standing between houses in the slum. Leanne said this was the path to the cult's main headquarters. She advised him to hide his identity and gave Dion the torn clothes that Remember had prepared. The guy didn't have time to get ready. Because of Liana's enthusiasm, there was no opportunity to go to the toilet, so Dion left before departure and ordered her to wait. Leanne didn't have time to understand how the boy had disappeared. She thought he was unwell, and she didn't want to send him away alone. She thought about the curse. Meanwhile, Dion finally went to the bathroom. He was allowed to use the house, but he was worried that Leanne might follow him. As he was leaving, he saw Cruel, which surprised him. Weakness made itself felt, and Dion began to cough up blood from fear. Not wanting to show weakness to his brother, the boy attacked. Cruel noticed that Dion could not sit at home with an injured hand. Dion understood that his brother meant the wound from the spy, and said that it was a small scratch that did not bother him. But Cruel is no fool either. He grabbed his brother by the sore spot. They jumped away. Cruel was talking about the shoulder, not the arm. Dion was injured hunting. How does the brother know? His brother's voice pulled Dion out. Cruel said, Dion is wounded, but he's moving. The bandits couldn't handle it. Hearing this, Dion became furious. He understood. His brother had sent the assassins. He must kill Cruel immediately. As Dion was about to attack, Leanne heard him. She had been looking for him because she was worried, but she was overwhelmed by the battle. The boy almost lost control. Leanne stood before him. Dion's blood was the effect of the curse. She considered herself unworthy. However, she was surprised. Dion had repelled Cruel's attack. He seemed familiar. She understood. He was the commander of the knights. Leanne decided to apologize to Aruth later. She had to deal with Cruel now. But Dion stood up, asking her to leave. It would have been great if Leanne had killed Cruel. But he was a hero of the Empire. The advantage was not on her side. Cruel asked if Dion wanted to go to the Church of Redemption. The boy didn't answer. Cruel didn't want to continue the battle. As they parted ways, Cruel said, if his brother goes to church, he is in danger. He must stop it. The angry Dion replied, nice to care when I hired assassins a few days ago. Cruel said nothing. He believed that Dion should spend the rest of his days in peace. Dion was born weak, with a curse. Although Cruel doesn't know the details, he is sure the boy doesn't have long left. He must finish everything before he dies. Dion sat there smearing himself with mud. He asked Leanne if she would do the same. She looked like a noblewoman. The guy understood. She didn't want to get dirty. Being a noblewoman by birth, she had never done anything like that. But Dion continued to provoke. He asked if she would leave him. Maybe it was a lie. The girl shouted that it was not so. Like a knight, she would not back down from her words. She would do it. And Leanne began to smear herself with mud. Within minutes, Dion and Liana looked like slum dwellers. Harut understood that Liana was ugly, but they had to be similar. Dion still remembered meeting his brother. He was sure he was here for the same reasons. He had to finish before Cruel. Dion had to hurry. He turned to Liane to hide her sword and turned back. Dion wanted to go in first. Liane tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. The guy apologized in his mind. There was no time to wait. He had to finish quickly. While thinking, he stumbled and fell. Lying on the ground, Dion realized that Liane and the church minister were watching him. The boy felt very ashamed. The maid picked Dion up, saying, "So hungry he can't stand." She asked if he had hit him hard. The guy wanted to say that everything was fine. However, there was blood on his hands. Dion excused himself by saying he was sick. The ministers were already taking him to the church. Liane was stunned. How incredible Dion was, how he played the game and ended up inside the church without cheating. Liane decided to follow in the Count's footsteps. The waitress apologized. There were no vacancies today. She asked if I needed bread and water. She gave me some food. She asked me to come back another time and apologized again. The servants immediately realized that something was wrong. The girl was given away by her aura and proud gait. They understood. Liane was a spy. Dion had a soft gait. He hadn't eaten for days. His hand was injured, he was spitting blood. Dion thanked him. He said he had heard about free products. The girl confirmed. Harut asked the price. The waitress replied, "She won't pay. She told me to rest and eat." Dion came in. Nothing strange. This place is like a temple. Good priests, happy people. The guards resembled holy knights. However, it was the lack of any differences that aroused suspicion. The maid pulled Dion out of his thoughts. She asked if he was comfortable. He said his appearance was disconcerting. The face was familiar to few, but the eyes were a rare color. The girl said, "If that's the reason, relax. No one will judge." She took Dion's cape off. When the servant saw the boy, she was surprised. She took his face. Looking into his eyes, she said, "They are bright red." The boy didn't know what to do. Embarrassed, he said, "I knew I wouldn't like it." His family threw him out of the picture. The waitress made excuses that she wasn't disgusted. She asked, "Do you know Dion Hart? He also has red eyes." He asked, "Hero of the Empire?" She, "Yes. Rumors, a vampire or an evil spirit. She is sure that he is bad." The guy understood what rumors were going around about him. The maid understood. This weak guy couldn't be Dion Hart. The servant asked, "Did Dion come knowing this place?" The boy asked, "Do they give you free bread and water here?" The girl said, "That's how everyone perceives the Church of Redemption." Dion hoped she would talk about their influence. The minister said, "This religion was created to save oppressed souls from the tyrant Eduardo. The cause of the slums is the emperor. If he had ruled peacefully, there would be no suffering." Dion was glad to hear that. Even Dion's fall in front of the church is the emperor's fault. He still hasn't made normal roads. Dion understood. No one before Eduardo had saved the poor. The servant was going to accuse the emperor. She said, "Our religion is different. They only believe in redemption. They don't believe in money." The guy understood. The nonsense of free food, that's why people believe. Dion was curious who was in charge. He decided to ask, "Who will save me from the emperor?" The girl replied, "You'll find out when you become a believer." Dion didn't understand why. Everything was suspicious, but there was no evidence. It doesn't look like anything was done with the bread or water. We'll have to dig into every nook and cranny to get to the truth. A girl crashed into Dion from behind. She looked about 12 years old. Despite her poverty, her face was full of life. The girl was very happy. She asked if Dion was a new believer. The boy replied, "Yes." The girl replied, "Nice to meet you. I'm Sia." She asked if the guy was having a hard time on the street. Without letting him answer, she said, "The church will help." The girl said, "Here, Dion will be given food without asking for anything." Judging by her eyes, she is not brainwashed. Why is she praising this cult? Dion replied, "I really want to believe in redemption. The girl said, "I know you'll like it here." Nothing suspicious, but how is that possible? The boy thought of looking into the protected rooms. The boy called out to her. He asked what she was doing. He said, "We should pray." This boy was her brother Paul. Dion couldn't understand why his brother was looking at him so strangely and angrily. Did he recognize him? Dion had to figure out how to get in. Paul scolded Sia. She found Dion pleasant. Leanne thought about the back gate. She couldn't go in. How would she look Dion in the eye? As she walked further, she saw bread. She heard the order to bring the captain. The maid reported the stranger. The captain is lucky that he is a hero. Liana immediately thought of Dion. He had been caught. She hoped to be able to help in time. Leanne burst through the door. She was looking for the Lord. Dion managed to escape. He was glad that he was not recognized. They called him to give them bread. He was scared. He returned through the window. I found myself in a large hall. A prayer room? Nothing strange, no clues. He went to the curtains. They were strange. He pushed them aside. He saw a servant and a priest. There was no one in the prayer room. The priest ordered them to check. Someone wanted to enter without an invitation. The ceremony began. Behind the curtains, Cruel held his brother. Dion was disappointed by the encounter. The minister next to the priest announced the prayer. Only the faithful gathered. Dion recognized the girl. She held a high position. The servant had prepared something important. She pulled back the curtain. They would enter a room accessible only to believers for explanations. The girl said, "The wall seems ordinary." However, putting her hand in, "The chosen ones can pass through." The guys were stunned. They didn't understand the magic. People were walking through the wall. Paul and Sia, too. When everyone was gone, the boys hid. Dion shouted, "Cruel, don't interfere. He'll handle it himself." Cruel was calm. It would be better for his brother if he were captured. Then they would raise the guard. Dion stood his ground. Dion went to the wall. He wanted to finish the task. He was looking for a place to touch. After a few minutes, he found a stone. As long as the person pays, the item creates magic, a method for using demon magic. But not everyone is capable. Witches are also hard to find. Has the church found rare enchanted items? High-quality ones. Dion wonders who is behind this. For Dion, this is a problem. He wanted to leave, but then the desire would pass to Cruel. A church worker burst in. The boys took cover. He shouted about an emergency. "We need to warn Shayen." The man approached the pebble. He asked if Shayen could hear. He said, "They have an outsider. Someone is looking for my lord, causing a riot." Dion thought of another guest. Leanne burst in. The guy recognized her, but didn't know what she was doing. Dion asked her to follow quietly. "Why such a mess?" The worker asked who was that milord. The girl understood. She had no right to call the count milord. She was bound by a contract with the emperor. Here is your text, rewritten with as few paragraphs as possible and without direct speech. She couldn't call him Earl. It was inappropriate in church. She replied that he was her lord. The worker asked for the name of the lord. Leon said it was none of his business. Dion watched. He didn't understand her behavior. Dion considered her the only normal one. Now he understood her common language. The connection is not broken. If it works out, they will catch her. Shayen heard everything. She understood. The same girl knight was looking for her lord. There was a poor man with red eyes in the church. The servant realized it was Dion Hart. Knowing about the emperor's task to Dion, she lost her vigilance. When Cruel entered, Shayen met him. She asked how he got there. She was sure that the Duke had sent him. She knew his intentions, but she wouldn't give in. Shayen asked if Cruel had received the information from the Lord. Shayen also served the same Duke. She watched him give orders. At the church, the girl informed Cruel that as the servant of the same man, she could only not call security. Pausing, she added that she would increase security until Dion Hart arrived. Cruel had to come up with an escape plan himself. Shayen didn't think Dion would come through the main entrance. The church's purpose had been achieved. All that was left was to restore order. Shayen hoped that Cruel, not Dion, would cleanse the place. Smiling, she said that they could continue praying. Meanwhile, Leanne dismissed the worker. She wondered where Dion was. She had to keep looking. She didn't have time to get up. She heard the boy's voice calling her name. She was glad to see the Count alive. Dion saw that the stone was not glowing. The connection was broken. He told Leanne, "We need to leave quickly. They will talk later." Leanne came up, got down on one knee, said she addressed him as Lord because she didn't know how. Apologized. Dion replied that everything was fine. It wasn't worth doing. Everyone was in a difficult situation. However, the girl took responsibility. She didn't realize it before, but now, after the service, she understands. She continued, "The guy is willing to get mud splattered for her, very brave to meet his opponent face to face." From that moment on, Leanne Rayner vows to serve the boy for the rest of her life, as long as it doesn't conflict with the Emperor's wishes. The girl will serve Count Dion Hart wholeheartedly, as if he were her master. The boy could not have imagined that Leanne would take the knight's oath in such a place. He had no intention of refusing. It was to his advantage. Dion said he would do everything to prove his worth to her loyalty. However, he remembered, Leanne's priority was the Emperor. The girl asked if they should leave. Dion replied, "They will retreat today. A good investigation requires the highest knights. In addition to the knights, they need a talented wizard who can reveal the secret of the room with the stone." 3 days later, Dion pondered in the manor. There are no good wizards in the kingdom. 100 out of 100 from the south. Is there really no one in the north? Hiring someone from the south would take a long time. Dion hopes Cruel doesn't find the sorcerer before then. "Remember," interrupted his thoughts. He announced they had found the sorcerer. The boy was very happy. He told him to start preparing. Remember added, "The sorcerer's village is a day's ride away." The next day, Dion's team stood on a hill near the village. Dion knew that wizards lived alone. But why had this one settled in such a wild area? Leanne turned to Dion. She asked to communicate without formalities because he was her lord. The guy refused. He was a count, and she was a noblewoman. Dion wanted to say hurry up, saw Cruel, unpleasantly surprised by his presence. Dion thought Cruel was after him, but it was probably just a joint mission. That's why their paths crossed. To their surprise, someone threw a rock at Dion. The team saw the grandmother. She screamed to get the boy out, because there would be trouble. She screamed for them to leave the village. However, Dion was possessed by another personality. With crazy eyes, he told his grandmother, "There will be no disaster, but real evil." The boy thought the old woman was crazy, but from the conversations he heard that she was a witch. He couldn't believe it. This old woman was the one he was looking for. The grandmother again threw herself at the boy. She said, "You can't hate everything. You have to remember. Don't hate anyone or anything. Otherwise, disaster will happen." The boy wanted to hit her. He didn't understand how the old woman had come so quickly. How did the old woman have so much strength to hold him like that? The old woman was approached by her granddaughter. She asked her to calm down. The grandmother asked if she also saw the trouble. The girl replied that she did, but nothing happened. Grandma said, "You can't judge a person." Dion understood. If this old woman is a witch, he will abandon the plan. He will have to look in the south. At that moment, a girl approached Dion. She was waiting for him. Her name was Ran, the granddaughter of the old woman. She wanted to apologize. Dion replied, "No problem." He wanted to go back anyway. There's nothing to worry about. The girl asked if the boy had come looking for the witch. Dion was stunned. He asked how Ran knew. The girl replied, "She is also a witch. She knows that he is looking for witches for the Church of Redemption." She added, "If the guy takes her, he will achieve his goals." Dion was surprised. Ran knew everything, although young but capable. If Dion doesn't take the girl, she'll go to Cruel. Taking her is better than searching the south in the dark. The guy wanted to rub his brother's nose. He extended his hand to Ran. He said that he was counting on her and her strength. Cruel thought, it's okay that he didn't get the sorcerer. The Duke is a higher priority, so he'll find another one himself. However, Cruel wanted to learn something from the old witch. The old woman approached the boy with a smile. She hugged him. Grandma added, even though he's been through a lot, she doesn't hate him. If he starts, no one will love him. As she left, the grandmother said, an unloved creature will live a short life, but he must live long and win. Grandma hoped that Cruel would win. He was a child of destruction. If he won, there would be no disaster. However, if he is on the verge of death or wants to die, he must make sure to kill that child before he leaves this world. Cruel took out his sword. He put it to the grandmother's neck. He would handle it himself. She must not cross the line. Cruel decided his death would come only after Dion. As Dion's team walked through the forest, the boy asked if Ran saw his future as a grandmother. Ran replied that she did. Then the guy asked how she predicted the meeting. Ran replied, they predicted the future for one child, but they saw Dion. Dion and that boy's fates are tightly intertwined. Ran finished it. They saw a boy among the trees. Dion didn't understand who it was. Was he following? Leon reported that since Dion didn't say anything, she let him watch. Ran said she could reveal something to the guy. Hatred for him is a mountain fire. It starts with a spark, spreads quickly, and a child is an explosive that can explode. When the explosive explodes, a fire starts. If the fire starts first, the explosive will explode 100%. The boy from the woods approached Dion. He knelt down. He said his name was Dan. Then he asked if he could join. If Dion is a mess, then he will be needed in the future. One day, Dan's destiny was revealed. A boy was sitting in front of the sorceress. During the session, the old woman was thrown against the wall. Dan asked what happened. What was wrong with his future? The old woman shouted, he is a puppet. He is a fool. He will serve chaos. The guy is a great supporter of chaos. From that day on, everyone in the village treated the boy differently. Children threw stones at him. They said he was a puppet and should leave the village. Dan didn't understand what was happening. He couldn't get used to it. Ran tried to calm the children down. She said, Dan hasn't done anything yet. You can't punish him. Friends and neighbors turned away. Everything before was a lie. All because of one prediction. The guy decided if everyone was so sure he would live up to expectations, he would become the right hand of chaos. His fate and the fate of chaos are linked. The guy decided to wait. Then he would meet the right person. Finally, the man appeared in the village. After a long wait, the guy immediately understood. Dion is chaos. Dan finally found him. The next day, Dion's team returned to the Hart estate. Met Remember, greeted the Count, asked about the boy. Leon replied, he is a villager. The Lord decided to take him. The boy added, call him Dan. Dion wasn't going to take him. He just said, do whatever you want. Dan followed them. Dan added, he lacks education. He doesn't know much. He has little experience in battles, but he won't betray his master. Dion glared at Dan. He thought about turning him back immediately. He didn't understand why Dan called him sir. He told the boy, they will talk later. Dion announced, they will leave the manor after it is finished. Leon should bring 10 volunteers from the highest knights. Dan came up. He asked if he could go with him. Dion didn't understand. He said, stay at the estate for now. The boy himself said he had no combat experience. How could he help? Dion cared for him. He couldn't let him die. Dan answered grimly, he would stay. Dion already wanted to go. He understood that the boy was disappointed. Did he really want to go that badly? Dion didn't know Dan's goals. The guy looked suspicious. But that doesn't mean the commander didn't like him. The operation began that night. The church workers smelled a strange smell. It was a fire. The knight said, leave the building calmly. Everyone will stay alive. Dion has ordered a fire. While he makes his way, the knights are to set fire, inspect the conditions, kill all suspects. Don't kill simple believers, only really suspicious fools. Don't use drugs during the mission. It's bad if they lose their minds. One of the knights asked, "Wouldn't it be easier to kill everyone?" Another said that the captain was too soft. He asked, "How will he survive?" The boy was outraged by the words. He began to demand that the order be carried out. Ran appeared. She interrupted the boy. She said that it was her request. Now is not the time for senseless bloodshed. One of the knights asked, "Now?" The girl replied, "She cannot tell everything." At that moment, one of the knights thought, "We just have to carry out the order." But he didn't understand. We would have to kill the disabled, the elderly, and children. People discussed, why did the knights come? Even if it was a sect, for people it was a place of help that was not provided. A girl approached the warrior Dion. She grabbed him. She asked, "Why are they doing this? If they are going to destroy the place, they have to kill her first." The girl said, "If the place is lost, she has nowhere to go." She begged the knight to return, not to touch them. The girl touched him during the quest. The knight can't leave it like that. He can use her as an example. The man took out his sword. Another child's voice was heard from the flames. C's brother was calling the girl. "Don't stand there, run to him." The knight swung. He dropped his sword at the last moment. He couldn't do that. It would have been better if they had ordered everyone to be killed. My conscience wouldn't have bothered me. At the moment the church was burning, someone's sword was aimed at the emperor. The people said, "They will never forgive the emperor for destroying their paradise." Meanwhile, in the church, Dion and the witch stood by the stone. The girl sensed that people were using the stone for magic. Ran said, "The stone has many functions: communication, distortion of space." She didn't have time to prove everything, how the stone was activated. The girl jumped back. Dion asked what was happening. She replied, "It was not a spell, but the magic hidden behind the spell. Ran is sure, created based on the distortion of space, activated by magic. Dion could not believe magic exists in the human world." A few minutes later, Ran reported, she had identified the structure. She asked for time. The commander wondered, does the Demon King know? After a while, Dion realized that sorcerers could pass through the space created by magic. Ran announced that now they could all enter. Ran went first. The boy saw. Everything was the same as when the servant opened the portal. He ordered them to enter. The team found themselves on the other side. Dion was surprised. The same prayer room, only in different colors. But Ran replied, "The room is different." She asked, "Does Dion see the cracks?" A huge seal stretched across the entire floor, probably connected to the door. It was the center. Everyone was curious about what was behind the door, although it looked dangerous. Leon went first. Opening the door, she saw a dense forest. The girl didn't understand why there was a forest here. Ran replied, "Magic again, disguised as a spell." They had specially connected another space. Ran thought they had to open the door specifically, to get into a real room, not a trap. Dion said, "The real room is their new target." Ran added, "Special actions must be performed to automatically transfer." Dion asked the witch how long it would take. The girl replied, "Magic is unfamiliar, at least 10 minutes. Dion understood. 10 minutes was too long. His brother could already be in that room. He could already have everything he was looking for. There were no other options. We would have to wait. Dion didn't want to lose to Cruella. Leon understood. The commander is nervous. This is a task from the Emperor. The girl put a chair. She said, "Sit, wait." However, when she opened her eyes, Leon did not see the Lord. She did not understand. The boy had just been there, and now he was nowhere to be found. In fact, Dion was already in the real room, and, as expected, he saw Brother Cruel again. The guy was unpleasantly surprised. Meanwhile, Shayen watched the fire outside. She understood. The knights were expelling the residents, but too gently. If she were the highest knights, Shayen would have sealed off the building long ago. She would have killed every member of the sect. According to the girl, Dion Hart's priority is to find evidence. He needs information about the organizer of the Church of Redemption, to strike at the main thing and destroy the church. But the victory will be for Shayen. Dion Hart will not get what he wants. Dion turned to his brother. He said, "He worked everything out quickly." The commander didn't know where the information about the room came from. Cruel didn't answer. He threw the papers on the floor. He threw the torch. Dion was indignant. His brother didn't know what he had to go through. With thoughts of saving at least something, Dion rushed to the papers. Cruel stopped him, grabbing his hand. Dion screamed for his brother to let go. They were pursuing the same goal, but his body wouldn't obey. He didn't have the strength to remove Cruel's hand. The boy understood. The heat was making it harder to breathe. His brother picked him up. He started carrying him. Dion told him to let go. Ignoring Cruel's actions, Dion was interested in one thing. Who was in charge of the Church of Redemption? The guy thought, few people are capable of organizing this. Who has absolute power and loves purple? This man also serves Cruel. Dion remembered the Emperor's words about the task for him and Illuster. Everything fell into place. The boy shouted at his brother. He asked how they dared to make an idiot of him. It had been a waste of time from the start. He didn't know why he hadn't thought of it sooner. While Dion was trying to escape, Cruel brought him to Leon and ran. The girls were surprised by the strange situation. His brother threw Dion to Leon. When the boy came to his senses, another personality had taken over him. Hatred for an aristocrat is like a forest fire. It will consume everything. Looking at his brother with crazy eyes, Dion said that he would kill him. He replied, "If you want to live, don't talk about the fines." At home, the boy recalled the events. Dion understood. His brother had taken the documents. Cruel had planned everything with the Duke. He had the evidence. Victory was also his. Leanne approached Dion. The boy asked if the witch had left. The girl replied, "Just now." This was bad news for Dion. He had a question for her. Leanne asked what the boy was interested in. Dion couldn't say anything about wanting a spell on Cruel. He replied, he wanted to ask how she dispelled the spell. Leanne said, if it's about the hidden room, it was all thanks to Dion. The commander didn't understand. He didn't do anything. Leanne added that according to Ran, if you walk 3 circles counterclockwise and then follow her, you can be transported to a hidden room. The boy tried to remember when he had walked in circles. He remembered sharply. He had done it, thinking about how to speed up time for Ran. Leanne told Dion that she was very surprised by his disappearance. She had noticed this more than once. Leanne began to say that Ran had left a note for Remember before she left. The butler was already standing at the door with the note. He added that Dion had guests. The Emperor's aide entered the room. He had come to escort Dion to the castle by order of His Majesty. The guy, who hadn't even had time to rest, immediately realized the time had come. He couldn't wait. Since Eduardo became emperor, he has never slept peacefully. He is tormented by the people he killed. They used to come only in dreams. Now they torment in reality. Hundreds of ghosts in his room, complaining, asking why he was the only one who survived. One of the ghosts attacked the emperor. He grabbed him by the throat. Fortunately, the crown prince entered the room. He reported that Dion Hart and Cruel had arrived. Approaching his uncle, he asked if he was feeling well. He looked bad. He said, "This must be another horror." He called a doctor. The emperor watched the spirits flying near Elpidius. The crown prince did not understand where Eduardo was looking. No one was to enter except him. Elpidius began to worry about the emperor's condition. The emperor replied that he was too busy preparing for war. Stress and overwork caused hallucinations. Eduardo felt sorry for Elpidius, but he wasn't going to get rid of the nightmares and hallucinations. Placing his hand on Elpidius's shoulder, the emperor said that everything was fine. However, the crown prince began to shout that he had already sufficiently compensated for the consequences for his family. The emperor knew he was sick, but without him, everyone would be alive. He made the decision to go to war. Enemies or allies, everyone died. Eduardo must bear all responsibility, not only as an emperor, but also as an ordinary person. Turning to the crown prince, he said, "Don't worry. He is carrying a heavy burden. He cannot simply fold his arms." Cruel stood. He looked at his brother. It was annoying. Dion arrived quickly, without rest. The emperor called, "And here is this fool." The emperor gave permission to enter. The boys approached Eduardo. They bowed. They greeted him. The emperor should have praised him, but he didn't look happy. The emperor was terribly dissatisfied. He ordered the heads to be raised. He added, "I heard that the task was completed." The emperor said, "Heard that Dion was displaying violent behavior, killed only those deeply involved, left the others alive. However, he actively sought out those involved. Even though he knew how Cruel behaved, it was he who found and brought the evidence. The guys did a good job, but Cruel got the evidence he needed, so he gets the wish." The emperor asked what Cruel wanted. He didn't think for long. He replied, he wanted the rights to the Hart surname. Dion now owns it. The emperor said, "That's an interesting wish." He asked what the current holder of the Hart family name, Dion Hart, thought. The boy wanted to say that he would never give up the land, but instead he said the possessions were a burden. He was happy to give it to his brother. The emperor said, "Everything is decided." He asked Cruel, "Does he know that to declare a surname as his own you need a title? Hart County already exists, cannot be given another title, can keep Hart and take another, or become the true patriarch of the county." Dion saw the emperor for the first time after the war. He offered the same. When Dion came to the emperor after the war, he promised his full support. He asked, "Why not become the patriarch of the Hart family?" A survivor who seeks revenge on his family, Dion didn't want to take on the role. Goosebumps just from the name. He said he didn't want the role. Dion wanted to fill his anger and desire for revenge. He had no intention of throwing away his name later. The emperor asked, "What does the commander want as a reward?" Raising his crazy eyes to the emperor, Dion said, "If he could have one wish, it would be to destroy the family with his own hands." The emperor replied, "It doesn't matter what Dion wants. Everything is easier with a title than without it." Then the boy became an honorary count. Since the title doesn't pass after death, it made it easier. It was the best decision. Cruel is not given any other options. Cruel has no reason to refuse. Most likely he will choose to become the patriarch of the Hart family. Dion will finally be able to destroy all members of the family. However, Cruel stated that he neither wants to become a successor nor renounce his surname. The earldom of Hart has a rich history, unlike the title of honorary Earl of Dion. The only direct heirs are Dion and Cruel. This meant that the patriarch's seat was still vacant. Dion didn't understand why Cruel was refusing. Did he really want to leave the Hart family without heirs? Dion wondered why Cruel had refused. Perhaps he missed his family or wanted revenge. Eduardo allowed Cruel to transfer the right to Duke Illustre. Cruel thanked the emperor. Dion hoped to go home, but the emperor declared that everyone was free except Count Dion Hart. Dion was scared. He didn't know what to do. Did the emperor really understand that he didn't need Dion? The emperor saw Dion's displeasure, thinking it was because of the loss of property. Eduardo wanted Dion to speak. However, the emperor announced plans to start a new war. Rescue from the Church of Redemption came in handy. The kingdom of Ilion became too noisy. Dion asked again if there would be a war with Ilion. The emperor confirmed that everything would begin with that. Dion is tired of wars. Maybe Eduardo will finally unite all the countries into one continent. Eduardo placed his hand on Dion's shoulder, saying he was leaving the Demon Kingdom to him. The Demon King will not sit idly by while the Empire takes over the continent. Dion has earned his trust. Dion must be by the side of the Demon King, ensuring his non-interference in the war. Dion thought it was funny, but he couldn't refuse, so he promised to do everything. The emperor insisted that next time Dion be without the cursed mark. The commander replied that he would do everything possible, but the Demon King would not accept the release. That same day, Cruel returned to Illustra's estate. The Earl asked if the heart name was enough for him. Cruel answered yes. The illustrator remembered that Dion wanted his back. The Count asked Cruel if he had taken the surname for his brother. Cruel calmly replied that he had nothing more to wish for. The Count agreed, thinking he was nervous. The illustrator understood that Cruel was not pleased with Dion's possession. He asked if there was anything else interesting. Cruel did not tell Illuster about the fight in the church, saying that nothing happened. Cruel wanted his brother to leave, but he realized that the Duke was behind everything. The boy was scared, not knowing what would happen if Illuster found out. Illuster called him to leave. Cruel must hide the truth, because if Illuster finds out, he will order his brother to be killed. On the street, Illuster praised Shayen for her work with the church. She replied that she was just doing her thing. The Church of Redemption has many followers, which will help achieve what you want. The church's goal is to create a faithful to Illuster, where the emperor is evil and the duke is redemption. The illustrious one ordered Shayen not to resume the church's work, lest the emperor find out. The church's goal is just a stepping stone to the duke's true goal. Shayen will succeed for his sake. The emperor summoned the nobility. People argued about the reason for the sudden meeting. The illustrator thought everyone was a fool because he knew the only reason for the meeting. Eduardo wants to declare war to prove his worth to the continent. The emperor and Nemesis entered the room. Eduardo thanked them for their quick arrival. Without much discussion, he announced, in 3 days, Eduardo would declare war. People were stunned, not understanding how to start new battles 2 years later. Eduardo replied that he had done nothing all this time because no one had any open conflicts. However, some kingdoms have forgotten what it means to fear the most powerful empire on the continent. The official pointed out that there were other ways to solve the problems with Ilion, but the emperor objected. Besides Ilion, there are other countries that are too lax towards the empire. When the hero of the empire was wounded, other kingdoms waited for a chance to strike. Hard times produce heroes. Many were born and buried in the 8 Years' War. Only 3 survived. Dion Hart is the last one worthy of fame. His name is known. Thanks to Dion, the empire conquered half the kingdoms. He is the driving force, the burden of the boy. Shouldn't the continent learn that the empire has more than just him? Conquest is a long-term goal. Officials continued to say that it was too early. The empire had not gotten rid of the revolutionaries. It was dangerous. The emperor smiled, noting that he had gathered them to find the best way out. The officials began to make excuses again. Eduardo slammed his cup down, reminding them that he was the emperor. If they speak without the intention of offending, then they should not argue, but follow orders. The issue of war is not discussed, but they have to solve the problem with the revolutionaries. Eduardo called Illuster, informing him that the head of the church had been found and was cooperating with the aristocrats. The Duke began to apologize. Eduardo abruptly drew his sword and held it to his throat. The emperor asked if Illustrious thought he was an idiot. The Duke never leaves his enemies alive. Eduardo added that there were rumors about the emperor as evil and the Duke as redemption. He asked if Illustrious knew this. The Duke asked if this was nonsense. The emperor replied that he was not evil, but true chaos. Illustrious said that the emperor could not kill him. The emperor asked if Illustrious had forgotten how he had taken the duchy. The illustrator stepped back, confident that it wouldn't hurt. But the emperor couldn't just kill him like that. Eduardo will not be able to start a war if the nobility opposes. The illustrator does not restrain greed. The illustrator wanted to take the throne. To do this, he first had to kill Dion, the imperial dog. Meanwhile, at the estate, Dion was talking to the prince. The prince asked if Dion was going to the demon kingdom. Dion didn't understand how the prince knew. The man added that because he was the future emperor, he should know everything, so Dion shouldn't worry. The guy realized that the emperor was sharing all the information with the prince and apologized. After that, the crown prince reminded that by order of the emperor, Dion must return if the king declares war. Looking the guy in the eye, he added that no matter what happened, Dion must definitely return. Raising his red eyes, Dion replied that he would keep that in mind. After that, the Crown Prince stood up and said that he appreciated everything Dion was doing for the Empire. In the Emperor's estate, the Crown Prince reflected that he must always be ready for Dion's sake. After all, it is not known at all what the king can offer the boy. Perhaps it will be something more than the kingdom of men. The prince understood that it was much better to maintain friendly relations with Aruth, although it could be very difficult. If they form a friendly bond, it will 100% help keep the guy in the human world. The Crown Prince was approached by his sister and asked how their meeting at the Hart estate had gone. The king asked why the girl refused to become the Crown Princess, to which the girl said that she simply did not want to. The prince also added that his sister, Alatea, is next in line, after him and Uncle Eduardo. The princess asked why her brother was so impatient, which angered her husband, and he asked her if she had heard everything correctly. However, the girl immediately said that he had reasons for this, and added that the emperor constantly talks about revolutionaries. Alatea grabbed her brother by the hand and led him to the garden, where the tea she had prepared was already waiting for them, and the man was supposed to rest. The joyful princess, holding a cup of tea, emphasized that sometimes you need to take everything much easier. However, the Crown Prince replied that the emperor had begun to hallucinate. He did not understand why the dead were bothering him so much. As the Crown Prince, he cannot say such a thing, but the emperor is an important family member for a man. The princess asked if the emperor had visited a doctor, to which she received the answer that it was impossible to force him to do so. The prince cannot influence his responsibility. It is not about responsibility, but rather a feeling of guilt. The brother and sister have believed all their lives that the emperor never for a second lets go of the guilt for what he did to his family. Eduardo swore that because he had done all this, the emperor would take full responsibility for what had been done. The Crown Prince said that he would do everything in his power for the emperor, and the girl should focus on her research. In those days, the brother and sister were still very young, and such an age was perceived as a sin in the imperial estate. In his estate, Dion sat on the sofa and wondered what the Crown Prince knew and why the emperor had told him everything. Dan came into the room. He came to report some information, but looking at Dion, it was probably not the right time. The guy had heard that the commander's personality often changes, but today it was something more serious than usual. Dion asked why Dan had come to him, to which the guy replied that he wanted to try investing money. Dion was surprised and asked the boy what he had said. Dion's crazy eyes really scared the boy. The frightened Dan replied that it wasn't that he had become greedy, he would give everything he earned to Dion. Dion approached him and said that he had been trying to find out what the boy's goal was since yesterday. It can't be that he would just follow a completely stranger for no reason. Dion thought the guy either wanted to gain his trust, for something bigger, or just follow him. Just when Dan wanted to say something, Dion, saying that it wasn't important to him, gave him a paper document. As he left the office, Dion emphasized that with these papers, Remember would lend the guy some money. At the end, he also added that he didn't know what Dan was up to, but he should never stand in his way. A few hours later, Dion was sitting on his horse. Remember approached him and said he had packed a bag for him. Dion looked at Remember and said that he wouldn't be at the estate for a while, so he had no time to arrange this when he heard a shout. Hundreds of the highest knights were riding towards him. The boy could not go without saying goodbye. Lady Leon was riding behind, trying to stop them, but they didn't listen to her at all. Dion was very unhappy with what he saw, and Remember also said that it seemed they had been caught. Dion abruptly left and said that before he left the estate to Remember, he had to deal with those fools. Remember, who watched this picture, said that again he, the old man, was being given such difficult tasks. But since it was an order, he had to obey. When one of the knights was already near the old man, Remember threw him off. Following the first knight, others began to fall. Within seconds, horses and warriors lay battered on the ground. Leon rode up to Remember and apologized. and the knight whom Remember was holding asked that the Emperor not take them to him. However, Remember didn't care about their pleas because as he left, Dion emphasized that the man did as he pleased. Leon approached the lying knights and told them to get up quickly. The last one would receive 10 penalty laps. One of the revolutionaries was watching this conversation from a tree behind. Remember felt someone's presence, but when he turned his head, he saw no one on the branch. Remember believed that those scumbags would not let Dion go so calmly on the Emperor's new mission. Meanwhile, Dion had already ridden far away and was trying to figure out which way he needed to go, so he dismounted. But unfortunately for the boy, everything happened just as Remember thought. Several revolutionaries were already waiting for him near the tree. The action moves to the headquarters of the Revolutionary Army, where one of the representatives communicates with Illuster. She asked the Duke if they had nothing to do until the Emperor received half of the continent. Daniel, the head of the army, spoke with Illuster, and he asked why this decision was made. The Duke replied that when the war reached its peak, the Emperor would be unable to do anything, and then they would get their chance. At this point, the Emperor's army will gather warriors from everywhere, including from the imperial estate. And this meant that the Emperor would not be able to fight back, even if the revolutionaries attacked head-on. Daniel said that the Duke had brilliant strategies and would carry out all his orders. One of the warriors burst into the room and announced that Dion Hart had left the county on the Emperor's orders. The illustrator didn't know how the boy could change the situation, so he said he should send a follow-up after him. Daniel said that the Duke had done a lot for them, so they could send a man from the Revolutionary Army. The illustrator was a little surprised by this offer, but he had no intention of refusing either. Daniel went to give the order, but Illuster already knew that the revolutionary soldiers would die in battle with the boy. The Emperor, of course, anticipated such actions by the revolutionaries, so he provided protection to the boy. One of the knights said that they had carried out the Emperor's order, so they could return to the estate. But the Emperor's men will not be safe either. The knight was killed immediately after these words. The illustrator also predicted the Emperor's actions, so he sent a hero, Cruel Heart, to the scene of the battle. If those who received the order do not return with news, the Emperor will start to get nervous. It was just a small trick to fool the Emperor, but there was a chance that Illustrious would learn Dion's purpose. After killing everyone, if Cruel catches up with Dion, he must confirm where the boy is headed. In the slums, Sia's brother approached her, gave her some clothes, and asked how long she would sit like this near the church. If the boy hadn't brought the girl to church, they would never have known that such warmth could exist. Although the children suffered from the living conditions, it was much better than what is happening now, especially considering the fact that this wonderful world has now simply disappeared. The boy said that he wanted to join the revolutionaries and take revenge on the Emperor for everything. Extending his hand, he asked if Sia would go there with him. Sia was a child that a boy found in the slums. He began to consider her his own sister. Sia ignored her brother, after which he turned around and left, saying that it would be worse for the girl. The boy understood that although he should always stay with her, he should not become emotionally attached. He didn't know if he would have been hurt less if he had followed the rules of the slum and not gotten attached. But it was too late. The boy couldn't just ignore and leave Sia. In the Demon Kingdom, Reinel has been waiting for Aruth for a long time. She has been talking only about him for several days. At that moment, the girl jumped up and ran, saying that she had received a signal from the western gate. The subordinate tried to say that the Demon King had ordered the girl not to waste magic just like that. But it was too late. The girl had flown away. A moment later, she was already flying over the western gate. Looking closer, Reinel was very happy, because there was actually standing there the commander of the Zero Unit, Arut. She rushed towards him, jumped in front of the guy, and asked how his mission went. Even though the commander scared the boy to death, he tried not to show his emotions. Harut reported that it was difficult. He found people who created their own religion and blindly believed in it. Reinel was surprised by what she heard. She asked Aruth what the word religion meant. The commander explained that it was something like demons following their creator, the Demon King. There were no religions in the demon world, but Harut believed that for them this would be the best explanation. The girl asked that if they wanted to believe in something absurd, why couldn't they believe in Sir Arutha? These words surprised the boy very much. He began to ask Reinel what she was talking about. Reinel decided not to answer, only saying that the king was currently in the Central Park. A gathering of different kingdoms was taking place in the park, and they were wondering why the Demon King hadn't been here for a long time. At the gathering were the King of the Elves, the Queen of the Mermaids, the Head of the Dwarves, the King of the Vampires. Previously, this place was called the Abyss, but since there were more demons here, it was renamed the Demon Kingdom. At the meeting, they discussed the events in the human world. The Demon King did not know that humans were so interested in them all. The Elf King said that after the continent, the Emperor wants to come here, he can't sit idly by. But he added that he hopes that people will not harm his people because of the behavior or mistakes of demons. The Demon King stood up and pointed out that the agent he had sent to the human realm had just returned. All the kings turned their heads and saw Commander Aruth near the gazebo. The Demon King said that the boy was on time, as he had a few questions for him. The king asked if the attack on the kingdom of Elion was just a pretext to take over the entire continent. The king removed the seal from Aruth. The boy replied that the emperor's goal was power over the entire continent. The Elf King had heard of Aruth, but he asked if the Demon King thought a common man was trustworthy. The king took the boy by the shoulder and said that as long as Harut was here, he believed he could be trusted. Harut understood that as soon as he turned his back on the Demon Kingdom, the king would immediately kill him. She asked Aruth what order the emperor had given him. The boy didn't know if it was okay to tell him that here. However, he said that he must ensure that the Demon King does not intervene in the war, and if he does, to return. And he added that although this is a completely different topic, magic has been found in the human kingdom. During the investigation of the situation with religion, Harut confirmed that instead of witchcraft, there was magic. The Demon King leaned over to Aruth and said that he was investigating, and that the boy needed to rest. The man also added that before resting, the guy should show his hand to Dr. Ben. Just as the boy was about to say that everything was fine, Ben unexpectedly appeared next to him. Harut was so frightened that he spat blood. The king emphasized that the boy urgently needed rest. As he left, Ben insisted that Harut show him his injuries, to which the commander said that he was fine. The Elf King began to ask what kind of demon had used magic in the human world without the king's knowledge. Looking evilly into the Demon King's eyes, he added that most likely it was his doing. Soon people will send a hero who will become a real danger to the Demon King. Unlike what had happened before, this was a real danger. The king did not know why he should fear the future. The Elf King did not understand what he heard, and the Demon King added that there was no reason to fear what would happen. The hero, no matter what, must appear someday, and besides, the Demon King has long been bored. The Elf King decided not to continue this conversation. He didn't care whether they killed the demon or not. Although the Demon King annoyed him, he was the leader of the demons who formed a line of defense against humans. It was all just a matter of time before people would learn of their existence if they got to the kingdom. The elves, along with other nations, must develop a plan of action against the invasion of humans. Everyone began to gasp sharply. The Demon King asked if they couldn't have chosen their words better. He did not expect respect from the Elf King, whose milk had not yet dried on his lips. The Demon King quickly stopped getting angry, as he didn't have many expectations from the children. He said he knew how elves hated demons. However, the Elf King should show a little more patience and be polite next time. Ben continued to run after Aruth. He begged the commander to let him check on his health. Harut said he needed to rest. Ben thought he didn't care at all about himself or anyone else. Ben thought it would be great if Harut valued himself as much as he valued others. A few minutes later, Ben burst into the room where Harut sat with the Demon King. The room was covered in blood. The king started shouting because the unit doctor was so late. The Demon King also asked if he had appointed Ben as a doctor because of such delays. Ben began to think that he did not deserve to be a doctor, knowing that Harut had been injured in the last battle. Ben thought that Harut would not allow a doctor who had failed in his duties to live. However, this was not the case. Ben asked why Harut wouldn't kill him, to which the commander asked if he wanted to die. Of course he didn't. Harut asked why he would kill Ben. The commander was fine, so the doctor could go about his business. As he left the room, several other subordinates stood in front of Ben, wondering if he was okay. The doctor replied that he was incredibly proud to be the doctor to Sir Aruth's unit commander. Ben knew that Harut was a very good commander, but he could not have imagined that he would protect his subordinates. It was that day that Ben decided to do everything he could to ensure that this never happened again. Ben ran after Harut and insisted that he examine him, at least superficially. Harut refused. After one of the refusals, Ben showed the boy a stone that was created with the help of his blood and magic. The pebble begins to glow whenever there are any blood problems in Aruth's body. And this stone also tells Ben the location of Aruth. The commander was shocked by what he heard. But it won't help if the boy gets hurt outside the kingdom. But with the king's permission, Ben will fix it. Harut told the doctor to forget about it. Ben began to say that the king would do anything for the boy's safety. Meanwhile, Harut approached Ed, who informed him that he had been expecting him since the moment he heard about his return. He also asked what Ben was doing here, to which he replied that he had to always be by Sir Harut's side. Ed began to worry. He thought Harut had been hurt. The doctor emphasized that the commander had injuries. This angered Ed, and he began to wonder if he really couldn't be given decent protection in the human world. Harut heard a familiar voice behind him. It was Hien. She asked if he would find a moment for her. Ed abruptly grabbed the girl from behind and apologized to Harut, saying he would be back soon. Harut couldn't understand why his subordinate was so angry. The demon realm was truly terrifying. Ed pinned the girl against the wall and asked how she, a succubus, had the right to communicate with Sir Aruth. The hyena, with tears in her eyes, replied that Sir Aruth liked the garden she was looking after. Harut said that the garden was a good place to calm the nerves, so she wanted to create the same atmosphere in his room. Therefore, she brought him a demonic plant as a gift. Its name was Sweetheart, and it also smelled strongly. Ed said that he couldn't believe that Arutha liked such a flower, to which the girl replied that it wasn't true. After that, Ed, saying that it was a nice flower and that he would give it to her, snatched the plant from Hyena's hands and left. Ed didn't want to let her get too close to Aruth, but the commander would be disappointed if his gardener died. Before leaving, Harut asked Ed not to kill the girl because she had done nothing wrong. At that moment, the assistant decided that he would just talk to her. As he left, Ed added that the girl had not approached Harut. If it hadn't been for his order, she would already be dead. A few minutes later, the plant was already in Aruth's hands. The commander could not understand why Ed accepted this gift. When handing over the gift, Ed said that the plant would never attack him because the gardener had trained it. A dagger flew sharply near Aruth. The girl's voice said that she expected the commander to feel the attack. The commander of the second unit, Devilia, entered the room and greeted Aruth. The girl started to say that Harut was very unemotional. Then she asked if her dagger really didn't deserve a reaction. The guy was so scared that he couldn't say a word, and the commander asked what he was saying to himself. The girl thought that Harut meant that he didn't feel the thirst for murder, but the commander didn't want that. The girl thinks that if the guy had been so thirsty, he would have tied her up and killed her a long time ago. Of all the demons in the kingdom, Harut was most afraid of facing Devilia, because she really pisses Aruth off, and the commander has prepared a big pile of gifts for Sir Aruth. The girl asked if the guy would accept everything, and Harut didn't even have the right to refuse all this. The girl had prepared several outfits. One of them was very similar to the one the Demon King usually wears. One of the outfits Aruth didn't like at all. It wasn't his style. The third was in the style of the southern countries of the world of people. He also did not like Aruth because he was too open. The girl said that dressing Aruth was a joy, because the guy looked unbeatable in everything. Just as she was about to put him in another one, the commander of Unit 8, Hell, entered the room. He reported that Harut did not answer when he knocked and also apologized because he did not know that the guy was with Devilia. The guy said everything was fine and asked what happened. Hell came to say hello, having heard about Aruth's return. Entering the room, he couldn't fit because of his sword. Hell fell to his knees, saying that he was trash, because he couldn't even calmly walk through the door. His Deputy 9 rushed to Hell, saying that he was simply carrying too many weapons with him. Hell replied that he carries a bunch of weapons, even though he doesn't even know how to use them, and added again that he is trash. Devilia, saying that they would need to postpone the fitting until another time, began to flee from Aruth's room. Approaching Hell, she reported that in the first city some scumbag had spoken badly about Sir Aruth. Hell immediately went there. 9 was angry because the commander had only just gathered the courage to greet Aruth. Devilia asked if 9 had a wish before she died, as she had raised her voice at her while acting as a surrogate. This mess really annoyed Aruth. He hoped they would go somewhere too. However, he wondered where Hell had gone. Hell was originally supposed to watch over the cities, but was given a secret assignment once Harut became commander. He was to ensure that information about Aruth's health did not reach the human kingdom. When the servants of the king's castle began to communicate about the appearance of the demon Aruth, when his face was revealed to the demons during the first mission in the first city, and even when he fought with the hero on the border of kingdoms, Hell sought out absolutely all the witnesses and silenced them all. Therefore, it was not surprising that not only the Imperial troops, but the whole world knew nothing about the commander of Unit 0. A few minutes later, Hell returned and emphasized that he had to correct some mistake. 9 emphasized that everyone can make mistakes, and Hell is a great guy, because he immediately corrected everything. He asked the assistant if he could congratulate Aruth, to which she replied that the guy was really expecting him. The boy was lying in his room playing with a cube, and when he saw Hell standing in the doorway, he was very scared. Hell approached Harut and said that he just wanted to congratulate him, as he had not had the opportunity to do so before. Seeing the blood, the commander asked if everything was okay and if he should call a doctor. However, Ben was already there. He approached the boy and asked if he was okay. Hell replied that it was his fault. Hell, saying that he would pay with his life for his mistake, pointed a large number of weapons at himself. Ben and Harut tried to dissuade him. Harut said he was very happy to see him. Hell was glad to hear that, because he didn't understand how Harut could be so kind to a scumbag like him. Harut said that Hell had done a good job, and since he had completed his task, he could go and rest. With a heavy aura, Harut looked at Ben and added that he too would be better off leaving the room now. Hell was surprised to see Aruth in this form. He wondered if he would still be able to come to him. Ben and Hell left the room. The plant began to calm the boy, for which he thanked it. The boy realized that he was finally beginning to realize that he had returned to the demons. People should live among people, and since the Emperor ordered to be a double agent, the demon kingdom is over. As a spy, the boy had to start by stealing information useful to the Emperor. The guy sat down at the table where a girl was sitting next to him. When she saw Aruth, she immediately greeted him. Everyone began to bow. Despite the fact that Harut was used to this, it all still scared him a little. As he walked, he saw a book, and when he picked it up, he realized that it was a report on the analysis of the Empire. Or to be more precise, it is a report on the analysis of the Empire, which was aimed at analyzing the hero. The authors are Devilia and Devilia. Opening the book, he saw that the first character on the pages of the book was Nemesis. Behind him was Stigma Primero. He was the illegitimate son of a viscount and was recognized during the war. While reading, the guy suddenly realized that most likely they had information about him too. Scrolling through, he found a page about himself, but fortunately there was no portrait of the guy on it. By order of the Demon King, the investigation was halted. The king couldn't let anything slip. Reading further, he found Cruel. It was written there that he served a duke who was an enemy of the emperor. The guy closed the book with all his might, because he was not at all interested in reading information about this scumbag. Then he saw a book that was written by Kaber. After thinking a little, Harut realized that it was the king himself. A warrior is a special person who is given the power to destroy the demon king. All the characteristics of the heroes were many times better than those of ordinary people. Harut knew this. Fragments of the hero are absorbed by humans, after which they become creatures known as heroes. Despite the fact that their abilities are much better than warriors, their characteristics are still greater than those of humans. But Harut never learned any useful information from this book. He already knew all this before. Looking closer, the boy saw that something was written about the Demon King. Perhaps this was important information. Before he could finish reading, he was startled by the king himself, who approached from behind and asked what the boy was doing here. The boy dropped the book in fright, which the king had pointed out to him. Harut apologized. Harut quickly managed to read that the existence of a warrior and a demon king speaks of the immaturity of the world. Harut wondered what that meant, and he also hoped the book hadn't been damaged in the fall. The boy asked what brought the king here, to which the king, taking the book, said that he had come for it. The commander looked at the demon king in great fear, and the man did not understand why the demon king was staring at him like that. The king put his hand on Harut's shoulder and apologized for taking away the book he was reading. The king waved and said that he would leave, and that Harut should not worry and continue to do his business. The boy sadly left the library. The worker bowed to him and wished him a safe journey. The guy decided to go back to his room. He wasn't a spy, he was just putting together his puzzles. Walking down the corridor, he overheard a conversation about the commander of Unit 5 not returning for a long time. It was a celebration for the demons. However, one girl said it was because the commander was investigating the accumulated mess. The unit commander was Uel. She was so inquisitive that even the king kicked her out of the castle. The maid reported that this was not just a party, because Uel was meeting with her deputy Durnovan. However, their interesting conversation was interrupted by Harut. The girls were frightened, because they did not immediately notice Harut. On the surface, Harut was very serious, but in reality, he could not believe that demons could meet. The servants were scared. They thought that Harut would kill them, because he had caught them gossiping about their superiors. The girls hugged each other, and with tears in their eyes, began to apologize to Harut. However, when they opened their eyes, they saw that the commander was no longer in front of them. They did not understand where he had gone. The guy wasn't interested in who was dating whom, but if there was a celebration, there would probably be special wine. Harut quickly arrived at the room where the celebration was supposed to take place, but when he opened the door, he saw only the remnants of chaos. This made the boy very angry. He immediately realized that he was late for the celebration. Taking the bottle, Harut saw that it was ordinary human wine. Uel had brought it because she was interested in people. While looking at the trash and bottles, Harut did not notice the cleaners entering the room, who were surprised by what they saw. One of the cleaners, with fear in his voice, asked if Harut had drunk it all himself. This question really angered Harut, because he hadn't even managed to drink a drop of alcohol here, and they were saying that. One of the charges, thinking he heard informal language, raised the alarm. Harut tried to stop them. However, rumors that the commander of the 0 unit, Sir Harut, was drunk, echoed throughout the estate. Ben and Ed, as well as the commander of the 1st unit, heard that Commander Harut had been drinking alcohol. Rumors that Harut had gotten drunk reached the king, who wondered if he had done it too soon. In an instant, hundreds of demon warriors gathered around the boy, some with swords and others with shields. And Harut was stunned, because he did not understand at all what was happening in this kingdom.